Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime as always, Vasili Gianarakos. How you doing, my friend?
I'm excited, Yariv. We're getting into the draft talk. Stanley Cup Finals are almost completed. So really just, getting into the beginnings of the offseason and all the fun stuff with the draft happening next week and then free agency after. And, what a time to have on, the man himself, the draft analyst.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it. You led up to it. We were obviously really excited to welcome back friend of the show. He runs the draft analyst. He covers the team. I'm sorry, covers the draft very intensely and helps us out with our Flyers coverage here. Steve Kournianos, welcome back to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Great, guys. Thank you for having me on as usual. Looking forward to what should be an exciting show.
Yeah, me and Vasili, we kept talking about how you were going to be on again. And, for those listening, we do schedule like a post-draft show. So we'll review the players that the Flyers took and we'll go like in depth on them. Not go full draft crazy unless crazy stuff happens. We'll talk about that. But there will be a post-draft too. But we've been so excited about this because, we were talking about it prior to this. Me and Vasili, we're doing our own research, but we haven't watched these guys. And like, I don't know if people are right or wrong. And I'm hearing one scouting report about a guy and then another scouting report about a guy, and they seem to not be exactly the same. And I just feel like, having you on kind of gives us like a set straight of like what really we should focus on. All right. So before we get started, just want to remind everyone to please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications on YouTube. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Give us a rating there. Well, we are very, very close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you guys can hit that subscribe button, if you haven't done that so far, that's a humongous help. And also shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks. They are reopened as of May 1st. Go check out their remodeling and go get a cheesesteak. And also Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go there for all your insurance adjustment needs. Again, that's 215-752-0560. Okay, let's get started. We'll talk a little bit of Flyer stuff, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes, which is the drafts, which is what we really want to talk about. So first piece of news, nothing really there to talk about, but I guess it's somewhat exciting. The Flyers have released their preseason schedule. It will start the 22nd of September against Washington, the 23rd against Montreal, 26th against the Islanders, 28th against the Boston Bruins, the 30th against the Islanders, the October 1st against the Bruins again, and then the 3rd against the New Jersey Devils. Not too much to discuss there, but I'm just ready for hockey already. To be honest with you, I'm like ready for the season. So at least we got that schedule and pretty typical stuff there. I don't know. Either one of you guys have anything to comment there? Not too much to say on that.
Yeah, not much. Just, preseason schedules coming out. Shows kind of we're getting to the end of the Stanley Cup Finals. So almost off-season time, right?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, plus you gotta figure that there are a lot of Flyers prospects that we've been waiting on. That I don't want to say that they're necessarily blocked in Lehigh Valley, but they've been with the organization, drafted in, let's say, 2018, 2019, 2020. And so although, we could say that Bobby Brink is going to be a regular but like for guys like Ronnie Attard and Emil Andrea, like that's what the preseason really does matter to them because it's part of training camp. And so that's why it's so violent. There's always so much fighting because they know that not only does fighting, let's say,
out.
it brings attention to them, but at the same time, like it's really that competitive. Like they want to make that sacrifice for the sake of the team and getting a job. So I like the preseason more so than NFL preseason. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a time to make an impression, right? For these,
and for a lot of these guys, they know that this is, especially if they're on their last year, they're RFAs or they're no longer waiver exempt, that this could be their last time in the organization. And if they like the organization, they like living in the area, etc., like it could be it. So I think it comes out in the play that you see on the ice.
Yeah, and there's going to be, there might be some prospects looking to get a long look too that aren't qualified for any the AHL yet, like Barkey and Bonk, that are
Sure.
probably going to get it somewhat of a look. And, we have some new signings. We'll talk about them. That obviously it's a big deal for all of them. So, before we get into the signings part, well, at least one new signing, but I guess we'll talk about them both, or all three signings kind of together. But Cam Atkinson, it just came out that we're talking about fighting for spots, and Cam Atkinson's a guy where it's been really tough to even pencil him into the lineup as far as right wing depth, and especially if Michkov announcement, is imminent, if he actually is coming over. That right wing side, or I would say the wings in general, are pretty locked up. And Cam Atkinson didn't have a great season. And as of right now, Darren Drager just had an announcement today saying that the Flyers are considering buying him out. And actually, he rejected a potential trade to the San Jose Sharks, one where the Flyers would have eaten a substantial amount of cap, probably 50%. And moved him out of town. I would assume they maybe would even have to throw in a pick of some sort. Probably not that high of a pick, but probably high enough to tempt them. But Cam Atkinson rejected it as a 10-team no trade list, and apparently did not want to move all the way to San Jose, kind of across the country there. And also they happen to be the worst team in the NHL. I don't know if that's so much it, but seems like he probably just doesn't want to move his whole life. So we were pretty against, Vasili and I. Vasili, I don't know if you were against it as much as I was, but I was pretty against the buyout just because I want to just suffer a little bit more in the short term than to have to eat some cap. I'm okay with being mediocre for one more year. But it looks like they don't want that potential drama of him kind of sitting out and being a 13th forward, if that is what's going to be happening. If guys like Bobby Brink, like you mentioned earlier, Steve, are going to take that spot. Steve, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts about doing something like that with Cam Atkinson, who right now has just under or over, I can't remember exactly, $5.5 million against the cap, where he's not even a guarantee to be in the starting 12 of forwards. Not an ideal fourth line player either, with his stature being 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah, I say you got to get rid of him as soon as you can, and it's not a knock on him as a person or a player. Like, well, a little bit as a player, but like we all know that he had the relationship with Torts. He's a gritty guy. He had some pretty big years too before, but you could tell that he's breaking down, and I don't know if he really has it anymore. This happens. This is just part of life, and although I wouldn't say that his career is over. What the Flyers are trying to do and where they're going, and you have that cap hit. Even if I know that buying out stinks because you have dead space, and dead space is the worst. But I don't know. Again, I think I've said this like 3 or 4 times on the show. Is like I don't know exactly which direction the team is heading in. Are they planning for a teardown? Are they looking at the next 2 drafts and saying let's just keep, or are they clearing out cap space because they want to bring in veterans because ownership is saying? I know what they're saying publicly about, hey, this is where we're heading, this is our direction, but Cam Atkinson cannot be a part of that, whichever direction you go in. And so, I think if you want to look at the money that they'll save to qualify RFAs, maybe bridge deals that might be a little bit expensive would make more sense. You take the dead space. The dead space will be like for what, like maybe 2 years? 3 years?
2 years, I think it's at 1.8 million, something like that.
And the cap's already going up. But he was a good soldier. He tried, but it didn't work out. So I'm all for him not being a Flyer anymore.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like if they were to buy him out hypothetically, it would be a 2-year buyout. The total cost $3,500,000, and then annual cost $1.7 million on the cap. So you are stuck with this contract essentially for the next 2 years at like a 1.7 hit on your books, which I mean it is small. And if you consider, the cap going up, it's not the worst thing to happen, but it does take a considerable chunk of the 1.7 there, and you got to factor into like the Flyers still have the buyout from Kevin Hayes on the books, and things like that. So how much dead money are you kind of
exactly
accrediting to guys that aren't even on your team? I think you hit the nail on the head, Steve. Like it's just that time for Atkinson where it seems like the writing's on the wall. Like he's 36 years old. This is kind of the time where you see guys potentially start to break down a little bit near the back end of their careers. And he's even a smaller guy, right? So it makes sense coming off a bunch of injuries as well. And didn't really play last season at all. So just looking at it, right, like him having 28 points last season for 5.875 million, the value definitely isn't there. I think from the Flyers' perspective, it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it because ideally you would want to try to avoid a buyout and more dead cap space in future seasons, considering they already have Hayes on the books. But obviously, we'll see, right? Because the Flyers had something in place here to go to San Jose. He declines that trade, according to Darren Dreger, doesn't want to move there. And you have to wonder, okay, what teams are really going to be interested in this guy who, even at half the cap hit, like if the Flyers do eat 50%, is that even worth it? Because what is he really going to be putting up like points wise, or what is he really going to be contributing, especially when you look at his play and him kind of losing a step? One thing I really noticed with him last season is just you could see the skating kind of deteriorate a little bit, where like in the past that was one of his big strengths, is being able to separate and kind of pressure people and pressure players with his skating abilities. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward. I'd imagine Atkinson probably rejects the trade to San Jose because he's probably looking to try to win a cup. He probably wants to go to a team that's at least semi-competitive in some nature because he hasn't won yet. So that's probably a part of it. And I guess we're going to see what happens. But I think with this news, I would definitely not expect him to be a part of the team next season, whether that be trade or buyout, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess if he might prefer a buyout just because he gets to control his own destiny. But at the same time, you're not guaranteed a contract if you're bought out. Like you could end up with nothing. But also from the Flyers' sake, it's like, do you even want to give up a third round? Is the third round pick, or, I don't know if people would try to corner them for a second round pick to try to get rid of that money. That wouldn't be worth it. Probably you'd rather just take the buyout hit rather than lose a second round pick. So I think they'd have to weigh all their options. And I imagine that question will probably be answered around the free agency period when players are kind of moving around. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and one thing too, Yariv, is the buyout window, I believe, opens up, I think 2 days after the Stanley Cup Final will end here. So if they are going to buy him out, we're going to find out pretty soon.
Yeah, well, you know what I thought was interesting, and Steve, you're obviously from New York, and I know you are a Rangers fan to a degree, right? Still,
to a very big degree,
right? Yeah. So I saw Barclay Goodrow was put on waivers, and I wonder if there's maybe a tempting offer there where the Flyers could potentially take on somebody like Goodrow. I don't know if they'd want to, though I do think he would probably.
He was infuriating this year until the freaking playoffs. So I know that
I think Torts would like him is the only thing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, where are the Flyers headed? Where are they going? What's the long term?
Yeah.
What's the short term and long term plan? We still don't know. And again, I've studied this team for such a long time. I don't know what their plan is, and I guess kudos to them for keeping it under wraps. But like if you're going to start bringing in young players, you want to have a guy like, let's say, Goodrow, even Atkinson still around to mentor them. And you could get a guy who's really cheap to do that. I mean, there are guys in freaking Russia right now in the KHL who are being good mentors to young players. So unless you and besides, the Flyers issue is the freaking power play. So if you're going to get anybody from the Rangers, get like Gustafsson or something. Don't get you don't need the PK doesn't need help. The team doesn't need to be more gritty. The team doesn't need more like jam and sandpaper and intangibles. They need a freaking power play. So, and he, like I said, Goodrow, he's got his cups. He got a very big deal considering his role. And he was a fourth line guy, and he did show up for the playoffs, but he took bad penalty. He was, like I said, he was infuriating for like most of the season. So you guys want him? Hey, we're rivals. Go take him. He's yours.
Well, the reason I brought him up is not so much that I love Goodrow. It's, my problem for your problem, and maybe that's the type of trade the Flyers will look for too. Though I do suspect maybe the buyout, just pull the Band-Aid and, that way.
Look at Minnesota, what they did. Look what Minnesota did. Guerin did it. And you want to talk about a poison pill to buy out Suter and Parisi. I think this year or next year is the last year 14 million in dead space for like the last 3 years with one more year left. But they've been on the side, they've been stockpiling. So it's dark times in Minnesota. You know, they didn't make the playoffs, etc. But the point stands that like a buyout has to be strategic. All right. You got to convince ownership to pay that money. So if the vision for the Flyers moving forward is to, you know, let's say do what they did last year, but with more youth, you need that cap flexibility and a freaking guy that contributes more. And so you're not getting either with freaking Atkinson. So I would definitely, like you said, I would not trade a freaking pick to get rid of him or move him. You keep the picks. I know the Flyers have a lot of them, but still, like, you know, a buyout, it's short term. And at the same time, like, you know, you see how the season goes, things go well. You might be a little bit of a buyer at the deadline, which is weird to think, but just, you know, it might happen. But you know, I think you guys get the point. You both said it too. Like, you know, this is a situation where you just can't have him on the roster anymore, and buying him out gives him freedom. And listen, a buyout, players benefit from the buyout because you get double pay, right? It's like getting a severance from one job and getting hired from a new one while you're collecting your severance.
Absolutely.
So like Dan Girardi was one of them. Remember, he got like $3 million a year from Tampa Bay when the Rangers bought him out. Like, you're not getting that money anymore. So I understand Atkinson doesn't want to go to freaking San Jose. But you know, like a buyout might not be the worst thing for him because he has more flexibility then to go sign elsewhere and you know, rejuvenate his career if that's what he wants to do.
I'll tell you that I think if Michkov is coming over here, which maybe is why we're hearing this so publicly about a buyout, I think you have no choice. You have to, unless there's some kind of decent trade.
Yeah, you don't block the freaking KHL move of the century because Cam Atkinson.
And
100%.
And you might need that, you know, because we talked about what Michkov's contract might look like. Yeah, it's you know, the cap hit initially is $925,000.
Yeah, it's gonna be bonus laden though.
Yeah, exactly. So it's gonna be more like $3.5 million.
Probably similar to Will Smith, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's the money right there. I mean, it's not even just Will Smith. It's all of them.
Exactly.
You know, Carlson, Bedard, they're all getting
all layered
$3.5 million. Yeah. So, so it might be inevitable. So speaking of fighting for spaces, one guy who's going to be fighting for space, but at least got himself a contract is Adam Yinning. Yinning signed a 2-year extension. It's a 2-way contract for the first year and then a 1-way contract for the second year, kind of telling you where the Flyers mindset is. I think the average is 778,000 or something. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, 787,000.
87. Thank you. I switched those up. And you know, it tells you where the Flyers mindset is that they see him still as kind of a borderline guy, but they do kind of expect him in the NHL in that second year. And honestly, I don't think they're that far off from what I've seen of him. He does seem to be a serviceable player, at the very least, a number 7 in the NHL. And I do think he could have a spot as a bottom pairing defensive defenseman. He's big, he's strong, he doesn't seem to make a lot of mistakes. And in the stint that he did have with the Flyers, he didn't really look out of place. So I'll let you follow up to what Steve says, but we'll go to Steve first because he's coming from a guy who has scouted him in the past and kind of, you know, where your head is at with somebody like Adam Yinning.
Well, I mean, he's known for his physicality. Like, that's what he does. Like, he's a mean guy. He's got length. He's a good defender from the dots down, right? You're not really going to ask him to do anything offensively related. And like you said, like, you know, he's definitely nothing more than a 7th defenseman. And from what I understand, the Flyers look like they might run back the same, unless something happens with Ristolainen.
Yeah.
It looks like they're going to run back the same defense that they had a year ago, right? And so again, we don't know which direction the organization is heading. So, but if they do that, he's just a contingency, and I think a pretty good one. And you know, LePerrier down in Lehigh Valley, he must have vouched for him to a degree, right? So that also plays into it because he's on the older. He's a 99, so he's like 25. He's going to be 26 next year. So you know, we don't know how much longer he has left in the organization. But, you know, he's familiar with everything. He's familiar with the strategies, familiar with the playbook. And I think from a penalty killing, like, you know, close game, late and close type standpoint, if he has to get called up, it's not going to be deer in the headlights. Like, he could actually be added value to a degree on, like, let's say a bottom pairing and offer you that physicality, crease clearing, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think nothing more, like you were saying, Steve, than really a bottom pair option for the Flyers. And he had some, a couple of short stints this season. He did not look out of place at all. And to your point, right, the skills that he showed that he was pretty good with in those games was the physicality, being able to close guys off, below the dots, behind the net, in front of the net, something you would expect from a big defenseman of his size and stature. And I do think, as you said as well, Steve, basically a contingency plan. Like, you saw all the injuries that the Flyers defense got hit with at the end of last season, which kind of tanked some of their playoff chances. So I would imagine that Jennings, a guy, okay, the team's saying, well, why let him go? We can keep him. He's familiar, like you said, with the strategies, familiar with Tortorella, familiar with the organization. May as well keep him in-house. Let's see if he develops a little bit more. Kind of, this is a make or break contract really for his career, probably in the NHL. And then, you kind of use him as a fail-safe, right? If there's any injuries to your top six, and you can just plug him in from there.
Yeah, and plus too, like, if you showcase him, if he plays, because there are going to be injuries. Sure. If you showcase him and you're like, oh, look at this, defensive defenseman who's physical and he's got size, and it adds value to him. And teams are always interested in those types of players. Teams who struggle on the PK, there's always like those types of things to consider. And at worst, he's down in Lehigh Valley again, and he provides, like, it's a good guy to have in practice, the experience, etc. And if they draft there's a lot of Swedish defensemen available in this draft. So if they want to go that route, he could be a mentor. Like, there's a lot of boxes he checks. So again, it's not even that much money, and I think the kid deserves it. I give him credit. He was a third-round pick,
second round pick.
And he took he used to take a lot of bad penalties, a lot of turnovers, and so you see him live, and you're like, he's actually got some NHL qualities about him. So for him to stick around this long, you got to give him credit. At least I will, So I don't think it's a bad idea to keep him around, to be honest with you.
I think he was not, I wouldn't say threatening, but I think his idea was like, either I'm going to get a chance at an NHL role or I'm going to go back to Sweden. And it seems like that contract kind of speaks to that, with the second year being.
Yeah, and Zamula if Zamula maybe played a lot better, if like Zamula was like, no, this is like my, like, then maybe it would even, but I think because Zamula and some of the other younger guys
are all
really
question marks. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all not, no one's really seizing any of those, if you want to say the last available left position. That he's like, hey, I could maybe win a job out of camp and even maybe play like 30, 40 games this season. So
yeah. And we don't know who the Flyers number 7 will be at this point. There's rumors that Eric Johnson might be getting re-signed to play that number 7 role, but if he is not, and they're not bringing in a veteran to kind of sit out majority of the season, maybe you're not losing much by having Yinning kind of rotate in with Zamula, or however they want to do these pairings. Plus, we don't know health, and there's always an injury that pops up, and especially in the beginning of the season, there's like somebody suddenly injured, just like Ristolainen was previously. So the Flyers did announce a signing, a somewhat interesting signing, just because I believe this is his third shot at an NHL role. Rodrigo Abalz. Okay. A 1 year, 2-way deal. He is a big boy, 6'4", and he's 28 years old. Seemed to be having success in the SHL, at least, probably one of the better players on his team. But I see a lot of people kind of talking about him as a potential NHL guy. I don't necessarily see that, at least from the surface level analysis. Seems more to be like the Phantoms didn't have a lot of size down the middle. It looks like not only him, but Oscar Eklund, who also was signed, who's a little bit younger by about 3 years or so. Both 6'4", both size, both look to be AHL bound, in my opinion. What can you tell us, Steve, as somebody who's probably seen both of these guys? Does a Bowles, does he have a potential NHL role here? Does he seem like an AHL guy to you? I do think it's a good signing from an AHL perspective.
Yeah, like, so the Flyers, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like they have like a checking line or a crash line like already in place, right? With was it Delorier and Paling and
Hathaway.
Hathaway, right?
It'll probably be, to be honest with you, it'll probably be Cates, Paling, and Hathaway. But
okay,
potentially.
All right, but I remember last season that was like going to be
to
like
start
like
the
the crash
season.
and bang line, right? Like that was going to be like your not just a checking line, but also a line that was physical and aggressive on the forecheck, etc. So A Bowles in Sweden was a top line center. Like he was a top line center. He was playing for Rogla. He didn't play for Rogla, but he went there this season. The reason why I know this, I was watching the kid Bixel, the Dallas pick. And so Rogla had a pretty good playoff run, and they went all the way to the SHL final. And Abels was their top center. He was their number one center, and he did everything. I mean, he was a number one center for a championship final team. Like good on draws, big guy, not like overly physical, but really good work rate, like always battling, very good passer, good playmaker as well. And I think he was he was with the Portland Winterhawks back in the day. Then the Canucks drafted him and they didn't say, so he went to Florida. That might've been the Jonah Gadjevich deal. But anyway, so this guy's been in Sweden forever. But if he does come to well, he is now a Flyers property. I don't know if he's really going to be the guy that, unless they feel like they want a more offensive tinge to the checking line. But like in terms of like his age, like we've seen this play out a zillion times where guys in Europe have a great, run or a great season. So I think my take on this, and Eklund too, and I'll talk about Eklund as well. Like he was a top line wing for Luleå. And Luleå was they've always been like a defensive oriented team, right? That's kind of like been their identity. And he was like a top 6 guy, but he's like really mean. He's like a mean, angry, physical, violent young man. But he's not a great skater, but he's got good hands, right? He can make plays. Like you could see him handle the puck okay. But he didn't produce in the playoffs. And when they played, I think Vechwo or Timra, I always get those so confused. I think it was Vechwo in the second round. They had to mix it up. That you go down early the series, the coach is going to start shuffling lines. Well, he got dumped down to like the third or fourth line, and he didn't play all that much. But he's like a first, second, third shift of the game energy guy, right? The first guy who throws the big hit, although he's not, like I said, he's a big kid, but not fast. But with both of these guys, I think it's clear that and again, I don't want to knock Flyers scouts because I don't know their process, but it seems to me like the SHL playoffs, like the stretch run and seeing them in big spots, right? Playing in key moments against, and the thing is about both Luleå and Roglas, the SHL playoffs was incredibly tight this year. All the games were tight, almost all the games. You rarely had like blowouts, like every game, it's felt like it was a 1-goal game. So maybe that ties into it a little bit, that here's 2 big body guys. One guy's a playmaking center who's got size and great on faceoffs. In A-Bowls. The other guy is energy, high energy, physical presence on the wing. I think he played right wing, but he's a left shot. Who's got good hands, right? And he could score. He could make plays, kind of. That it could just be something in the AHL. Set the right example. Fit the team's identity, what they're trying to do. Will Perrier, if they're in the AHL, well, he liked them. He'll definitely like Eklund. And so that's it. But again, like, is this an identity? Not necessarily an identity shift as much as is it like a continuance, like where basically want a seamless transition into the next season. So we want to maintain guys that have size, have jam, and can help us compete with the better teams in the division and conference. But I don't know how much you should expect out of either of them offensively, because it's obviously a massive shift when you go from Sweden and those rinks to the freaking Metro Division.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting to see the Flyers sign both guys out of Sweden. Like, to me, it seems like they're trying to bolster depth, whether that be in case of an injury. At least you have guys that have played, in pro leagues overseas. You're not interrupting maybe a young prospect's potential development in the AHL, and you can bring up a guy like this in Abels or even in Eklund to kind of fill a spot on the fourth line or something like that. But yeah, I would imagine it to be more of like that NHL, AHL tweener type situation for both of these guys, where chances are you're probably going to see Abels like on a first line with the Phantoms, and Eklund maybe like in that type of role versus having a significant impact on the Flyers or anything like that, unless there's any injuries. And I think at least with guys like this who've played, many years pro and have experience playing against men, you can probably plug them in pretty seamlessly. And like I said, you don't have to really interrupt, a 19-year-old's development and kind of bringing them up to the NHL if you don't think that they're ready. So
Yeah,
maybe some kind of safety and insurance for that, right?
Which, to that point, Briere did mention that he didn't think there was pretty much anybody at the forward position in the AHL from the squad that they had that was capable of doing that, really. Outside of Bobby Brink, who was kind of like an in-betweener, but primarily an NHL player. So it's going to be interesting. I don't expect either one of them to make the team. And right now, Tanner Lazinski's unsigned, Cooper Marotti's unsigned, and I believe Adam Brooks are unsigned. And they essentially played that role. I don't know if these guys are a great replacement for what those guys bring, especially like Tanner Lazinski, who can make the argument was the Phantom's best player last year. So I'm not sure. I want the Phantoms to be better, but I don't know if this
I mean, where the...
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
Where the Flyers rank last year, and you don't have to find out. I'm saying, like, if the Flyers had an issue with like face-offs, then I could say, like, you could consider Abels as like a specialist, and because he's got size and he's on the mature side, that it wouldn't be like the worst case scenario. Let's just say if the Flyers had like a face-off problem, he could come in and maybe help that.
We did a little bit, actually.
Other than Couturier, they weren't that great.
Yeah.
So maybe that plays into it a little bit, and then maybe with the younger guys coming up, that you could look at Eklund as not necessarily like a protector, because he's not a goon. He's just he plays a heavy game. It's like I said Jonah Gadjevich before, like he was a cast off. The Canucks drafted him, and he never really, he was in Abbotsford for a long time, but he ended up on Florida and he played like half the season this year. He's like 27 years old, 26 years old now. So I think that teams are now looking, not now because they've always done this, but I think that it just makes sense sometimes to give a reclamation project or someone who's paid their dues a chance in the minors. And then if you have a guy like Eklund down on the farm, again, like I always ties back to competition, where the young guys, no matter how high they were drafted, no matter how prominent their reputation is down in the farm, like they want to be the top line. Everyone wants to be the top line center or the power play quarterback. So maybe having these guys there will push them a little bit harder in practice. I mean, who knows? But I don't have a problem with either signing though. I like, if you watch the SHL playoffs, if you watch the SHL, like they were both very good players for their respective teams, and they were good teams. Well, Leia was but they were, they won a playoff round, and Eklund was like not the main guy, because I don't think Eklund had a single point in the playoffs. Whereas Abels was like the top scorer for Roland.
12 points in 15 games.
Yeah.
I think in the Abels signing, and I don't expect this from him, but I think everybody's kind of, the Flyers themselves are looking for their next Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, right? The guy who, he didn't produce much offensively, but the guy was a pretty good shutdown fourth line center that could win faceoffs, skate against the better players in the team, and on nights shut them down. And if they can find a guy like that out there for a reasonable cost, for a really cheap cost, that the worst comes to worst, he plays a big role for the Phantoms, I think it's a win-win. So I do like the signings. I'm just skeptical that they'll have a big any kind of role in the NHL. I've like kind of learned my lesson.
They're good.
On that.
They're good like depth signings, right? And then you kind of see what happens from that point.
Yeah.
Low risk.
Yeah, low risk, potentially somewhat high reward, I guess, relative. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes. This is why we wanted to do this episode to begin with. We want to talk about the draft, Steve. And obviously, you have your own. We don't need to do like a mock draft thing. I don't really believe in that stuff because how the hell are we going to know what teams really want? Like, we can, like every time I see like these surface analysis of like a mock draft and I see, oh, this guy was born to be a flyer. And it's like, was Mitchkov born to be a flyer? Like the reality is teams are going to look to pick the players that are highest on their list, right? Like and whoever's available, they're going for that guy, right? Like maybe there's a culture fit, but we're not going to know any of that stuff from mock draft. So what we're interested in is your rankings. And I guess let's go through the top 15 since the Flyers fall at 12. And we want to know more about them. And I know you got your list probably ready in front of you. Want to know about this top 15, then we'll go into the guys below them and guys who could maybe sneak up, sneak down, and talk about the other picks the Flyers have available.
All right. So first off, I have to preface what I say is that I spend 11 months to 12 months out of the year following every league, every as many prospects as I can. By the end of the year, I have anywhere from like 500 to 700 individual reports, right? About a third of those, if I have time, will get published in my draft report. So I look for context. I don't care about the consensus. I don't care about public rankings and consolidated rankings and public mock drafts. I don't listen to anybody else's opinion. I thoroughly enjoy watching draft prospects play, and I try to find context within their seasons. I don't go for best player available as the kid with the most stats. I don't care about analytics. None of that stuff. I watch games, and so my rankings are going to look a lot different than most, right? In terms of like NHL Central Scouting is usually the baseline, and they kind of set the trend for everybody else. But I had a major issue with Central Scouting's rankings this year, and I wrote about it on my blog. So I just want to put that out there because what I look for in players as well is best players in the NHL 5 years down the road, right? That's what I look for. I don't care about predicting about the draft. I also do something. I do this every year. I always pick 2 to 3 guys for the late first round that I think will become steals or stars. And I'm going to bank on them. A lot of times it doesn't really always happen. But it's one guy that might not even get drafted. Well, not get drafted, but the guy might end up being like a 4th round pick, and I'll have him in the first round. I think Khrushchev was one of those guys for me. And then in 2020 it was Dmitry Zlodiev, and he's like still in the minors. So just that's how I create my rank. So I watch every league. I try to find out who the best players in the leagues are, the best players on the teams. And that usually ties into, how I rank players. So Macklin Celebrini, easily, without a doubt, number 1 overall. I had Cole Eiserman ahead of him in the preseason. And within a matter of weeks, it was changed. I just changed it. So there's really nothing else to explain there. He had a Jack Eichel, Paul Kariya, Adam Fantilli kind of freshman year at college, won the Hobie Baker, youngest, I think, to ever win it. And what I love about Celebrini is that he was clutch for everybody. Like he's a big game, big moment guy. He did it for Team Canada at the World Juniors when the whole team couldn't get anything done. He's the youngest guy on the team. He stepped up and he was the only one generating consistent chances. So, Sharks got a great one in that. And I'm not going to go through every single player because it would be here forever. Anton Salaev at number 2, best defense prospect I've ever seen in the 10 years I've been covering the draft since 2015. So I think he's going to be like an elite premier shutdown guy. That's the only reason why I have him slightly ahead of Ivan Demidov at 3. Ivan Demidov is basically Mitch Kov light. He's been phenomenal all season. People want to point that he hasn't played in the KHL. Listen, Crosby never played in the AHL, Stamkos. None of those guys played against adults, and they became superstars. So I don't think it really matters all that much. But in terms of the second best player in the draft, I would say would be Demidov, but I have a hard time not rewarding Salaya for really blowing me away with his defensive play. I mean, 6'7" kid who could skate, and he blankets the low slot.
Is he? I'm sorry to cut you off here. It's interesting that you have Salayev so high because I keep seeing Levshinov right above him.
No. We'll get into Levshinov in a second.
Okay. All right.
All right. So Tidja Ginla, I have it 4, a wing from Kelowna. Forget about the fact that his father was Jerome Ginla. This kid does everything. He does absolutely everything. I mean, he kills penalties, he hits, he's got a great shot. And I think that what he did at the U18 Worlds, recency bias is real. I think that might really have put him over the top over, let's say, some of the other guys. Number 5, I have Kunsta Helenius, smaller playmaking center from Finland that I think is just a brilliant playmaker. But also has like a little bit of some jam in his game. Zeev Boyum, offensive defenseman at 6, phenomenal season for Denver, won the national championship, scored big goals, playmaker, power play quarterback. Berkeley Catton at 7, elite playmaker, 50 goals, 60 assists season in the dub. He was great at Helenka, great at tournaments, great at everything, playing for Spokane. So I think he might have the highest ceiling point production wise after Demidov and Celebrini is Catton. 8, speaking of the Flyers, probably a potential target is Sam Dickinson. We saw London Knight defenseman. He's great. He is a lot of fun to watch. He's everything you want. A little bit of an Alex Pietrangelo kind of game in him, except he's a lefty. Carter Yakimchuk, I have at 9. Another guy that maybe the Flyers might look at. Right shot defenseman. He could skate. He could hit. He's big, and he's got a really good, I guess, a deep arsenal of moves. He's a fancy kind of a defenseman, but he's got that. What is he, like 6'3", 210?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big guy for sure.
Yeah, number 10 is a little bit of a controversial pick because he's got some off-ice stuff going on with Trevor Connolly, and that's because he just destroyed the USHL. From the wing, great playmaker. They say, he's got some issues with teammates and he was a bad teammate and mean. And then he took that horrible penalty in the gold medal game that might have cost the U.S. the gold medal. But I'm things going to mature and he's going to have a lot of points in the NHL. 11, Cole Eiserman, best goal scorer in the draft. Enough said. Number 12, Nygaard, the big winger out of Norway. Prototypical NHL build, shot, loves to shoot, played in Sweden this year, did a pretty good job. Now we're going to get into some of my controversial rankings. Caden Lidstrom at 13 is a center. Wouldn't be a bad pick for the Flyers, his best player available. My concern are he's got 2 serious injuries, or 1 serious injury and another injury, I think the hand. And he as a center, the kid barely had any assists. He didn't have a whole lot of primary assists, playing for a high-scoring team in the dub. So I have concerns there. And then Lev Shinov, I have at 14. I spent a lot of time watching him at Michigan State. He was not their number 1 defenseman. That team had forward support up the yin-yang on everything that went on. He had a lot of periods where he was turning pucks over, not good in the defensive zone. But he's big, he's mobile, he's a great passer, distance passer, etc. I just think that I don't know why he's being locked in at 2. In my opinion, he's done nothing to separate himself from the other defensemen. They all should all be in a group, and there should be variance, and there isn't any. It's him at number 2, and that's what everyone's convinced that's going to happen. I don't agree with that. 15, Zane Parekh, right defenseman, a great offensive guy, 30-goal season you just saw him in the Memorial Cup with Saginaw, so he's going to be a potential high point producer. 16, I got Sasha Boisvert from the USHL Muskegon, big center with skill, a lot of flashy moves, but he could play a heavy game if necessary. Beckett Seneca at 17 is a winger. I see him rising up a lot. He's got hands for days. He could picture a power forward who could skate and stick handle his way through a wall, a coverage. That's what he does. Here's a guy that's very under. This guy is. I want to get him in my top 10 so bad, but I couldn't do it. And that's Igor Chernisov from Russia. Man, he's good. He's real. If he played in North America or Sweden, man, he would be. And if this draft wasn't so heavy with defensemen, he'd probably be up there in maybe even top 5 because he's got a power forward with a great shot. But he's also a very good playmaker from the wing and a pretty good skater too. Now we're going to start getting into some of my non, I guess, standard picks compared to the consensus, and that is Linus Eriksson. I have at 19 as a center. Played in the Allsvenskan for U Gardens. They just missed qualifying for the SHL. I felt bad for them, but he had big moments, and his line mate was a kid who was going to be a top 10 pick next year in Eklund, whose brother was the San Jose pick. But he does everything. He's a leader, great on faceoffs, great shot. Dual threat, not very big, but just like, Elias Lindholm. Think of it like an Elias Lindholm kind of a player. I'm not just saying that because he's Swedish. He has like that Selke-esque kind of like skill set where you get the skill, you get the smarts, the maturity, but also the defensive play. Next up is definitely a Flyer, a kid that I think the Flyers are going to look into. Well, he's Russian, Yegor Surin, violent center. He could play wing too. Has one of the best shots in the draft. This kid is very demonstrative. He's very physical. He blows dudes. He puts a hurt on people, and he kills penalties. He's very versatile. 21, another really good defensive Swedish center, and Linus Pettersson, fast, can make plays off the rush. He had really good tournaments, so that's going to help him. But I like the fact that Moto J20 wasn't very good this year, and he was basically like the main standout as a first-year draft eligible. 22, a Russian kid, Nikita Artamanov. He, like Salayev, they both play on the same team, Nizhny Novgorod, but he's a winger. And right off the bat, this kid had a great start. He was like the KHL player of the week, I think, like the first 2 weeks. So that put the spotlight on him. But he lived up to it, and he kept – when do we see KHL, 17, 18-year-olds play 12, 13 minutes a game for a whole season that aren't named Matvei Michkov? It's not common. So he did that. He's very energetic. He played on PP2. And he went back down to Chaika for the MHL playoffs. I thought he did pretty well there as well. Almost there. Number 3 is Tarek Parasic, right wing out of the WHL, 100-point scorer, phenomenal skill. Just one of those like pucks. Think of Bobby Brink in terms of like the playmaking and the decision making and the vision, spotting guys, and he very highlight reel kind of a scorer. Next up, we got Liam Greentree. I got him pretty low at 24. I could see a lot of teams like this kid. He's a power forward. He scores goals. He's an OHL kid. So maybe, you watch the playoffs, you see Florida, you see all these big teams, heavy teams succeed. They'll want a reactionary draft and take him. Number 25, underrated defenseman in my book. He should be a lot higher. I wish I could. He's a right shot. His name's Dominic Badinka. He actually is one of the few European trained defensemen that played a full season or almost a full season against men. You don't have a lot of them this year. You have guys that played like 10, 15 games, but Badinka was there with Malmo, and Malmo's J20 team was terrible, and I think their SHL team was terrible. But he played about 40 games. He could skate. He's a Czech kid. He could skate. He could clobber the puck. He's got a big shot. Next up, I got Jet Luchenko at 26. Probably should rank him a little bit higher, but he's a center out of the OHL. This is like a coach's dream kind of a guy, right? Does everything. Very good playmaker, very good vision. Definitely on the plus side of it, we can fit pucks through tight windows, everything. But he also, wins face-offs. He just seems, he's not big, but he just kind of is like that very coachable, solve my problems, late in games kind of a player. Number 27, I think I had him mocked to the Flyers potentially as a surprise pick with the Florida draft pick. And that's Teddy Stiga from the NTDP. This kid is great. There's so much to love. His work ethic, his scoring. This guy was on the NTDP where we're all talking about Cole Eiserman, but Stiga on many, many nights was the best player on the team, and he plays the same position. So they weren't on the same line. He was always, I think they were on the same power play together, but Stiga's got a bomb one-timer. He hustles, he hits, and he's Boston College bound. In a way, Boston College, his size, you could say he's kind of like a Cam Atkinson. Not the 36-year-old Cam Atkinson, the young 40-goal scoring Cam Atkinson. All right, we're getting rid of him fast. All right, next up is Michael Hage, I'm sorry. Center out of Chicago in the USHL. Big kid, upright skater, but he carried a really weak team in the USHL this year. He was the main guy. They knew it. He drew all the coverage, and there was nothing those teams could really do against him. One of the top scorers in the league, a dual threat, playmaker, very good skater. So I think because this center isn't very heavy on centers with size who could skate, I think you're looking at a potential top 15 pick there, but I got him down at 28. Number 29 is a kid I love in Sweden named Melvin Fernstrom. He's played for Sweden at all the tournaments, but he played on a loaded team, a Rebro J20, that they didn't make the initial bracket of playoff seedings in the J20. He went to the seeding stage. It's called Forts, and he murdered it. Oh, the whole team murdered it, but he was probably like one of the best ones on that team, on a loaded team. And he's got like Philip Forsberg. I get Forsberg vibe, like 35, 40 goals is his ceiling because he's got a great shot. Next up at 30, I got Stian Solberg. I think everyone should be familiar with him from the World Juniors, playing for Norway. I like the fact that he played the entire season in Norway. He didn't try to like increase his spotlight by going to the CHL or going to. Now he's going to go to Sweden next year. I think he's going to go to Färjestad next season. But he could skate. He loves joining the rush, and he hits. He's very, very physical, and he reminds me of a kid Karamazov that the Blues drafted that I liked a lot and had my first round in 2021. But Solberg is definitely like top 15, 20 caliber in a normal draft year where you don't have 1,000 defensemen in the top 10. And then the last two smaller guys, these are the guys that I'm banking on that I think are going to be really outstanding NHL players. 31, I have Tanner Howe. He was kind of Bedard's line mate last year with Regina, and the people were saying, well, he benefited from, Bedard being there. And so remember, that line was Bedard, Suzdalev, and Howe. Bedard leaves. Suzdalev does not have the kind of season that he had with Bedard, whereas I think it was with another team too, whereas Howe almost like carried the offense for Regina. I mean, they weren't that good of a team this year, but he's scrappy. He's very skilled, just on the smaller side. So he's a wing. I have him at 31. And then at 32, man, this poor kid has been crapped on all season. Alexander Zetterberg, he's a money player. He is a clutch player. He's small, 5'7", 5'8". He's going to go to BU next year to join the Verlander kid, the defenseman the Canucks drafted last year. But he also was on a Rebro J20. He played with Fernstrom. They were line mates. But one thing I noticed about Zetterberg, at tournament level, at playoffs, league play, every time his team needed a change in momentum, he's the one that did it. Little guy, attacks the middle, not scared to get hit. If he gets knocked down, he gets right back up. And the offense is wonderful. I mean, he's one of the leading scorers in the league. So, it's definitely a defense-heavy first round, but I want to give more love to some of the forwards. And so I think that if you go by my rankings, there's going to be a lot of good forwards in the second round, maybe even into the third. I would say first round caliber up until like maybe the middle part of the second round for forwards, but also with defensemen as well. It's that kind of a draft where you'll have guys like Leo Solon Wallenius and Alphonse Fry and Cole Hudson, according to my rankings, in the second round. And those guys are, in my opinion, late first round quality. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't take up too much time going over it.
No, that was great. Go ahead, Vasili. You want?
Yeah, I was going to say, Steve, like just based on what we've heard kind of leading up into this draft, obviously after last year's draft and it being so deep, right? People kind of talk about it and narratives are pushed out by media that, hey, this might not be obviously as deep as the prior draft. But now that you're looking at, I mean, some of these, players that might be available, for example, like around 12 for where the Flyers might pick, right? Like you list them off, like you have, Yzerman, Yakimchuk, Dickinson, like you can go on, right? Like Hellenius, all these types of different players. Would you say that, the ability to select an impact player in this first round between like 8 and 16 is definitely a possibility?
Their impact plays in the second and third round. Here's the thing. It's a cap era, right? We're all stuck on this mindset that, from maybe the 90s or the early 2000s where, if they're not at the World Juniors, like lighting it up or like, they have to be playing against men to score. And there's not a lot of guys playing. I get that to a degree, but we knew from the get-go that this draft was going to be at a disadvantage because it was following up a near historic class, right? The 23 class was behind, put in the same breath as 2015 and 03 and 79 and
it's historical. Exactly.
Yeah, so we knew that was going to happen, and it's unfair. So the only thing that we can do, people like myself, is watch the damn games and don't cling to well, Central Scouting says this or Bob McKenzie's ranking said this. No, I don't care about what they say. To a degree, I care about what Central Scouting says, but I have to go verify for myself. Like Ben Bradley says in All the President's Men, I don't trust anybody. So I go and I have to find that for myself. And by watching these kids in every situation, it's just like watching the Flyers, right? When you watch the Flyers, they're going to go on a losing streak, okay? And a player's going to play well, and there's going to be some players playing well during the losing streak. So how do they respond? Who helped them get out of the losing streak? Oh, now they're winning again. Why are they winning? Is it special teams? So these are all the things that I look for when I'm scouting these kids or writing about them. So I definitely did not get a sense that this group is somehow poor or below average. It's stupid to say that because teams are promoting these kids anyway. They have to. It's a salary cap world. They have to be more patient with these kids, which is not the case from previous years. In previous decades, where if you didn't make it within year 1 or 2, you're done and that's it. And we're going to just go out and get more veterans and get veterans. And, it's not really like that anymore. And so I think that the quality of this draft is completely average. The only thing that makes it different is that the defense crop is on a level like 2018 and 2012. Now, 2018, and I was part of this machine that said it was a very deep draft, near historic. Well, from the defense side of it, it looks like it because they just had 4 defensemen from that group at one point, all hit 60 points last year. Bouchard, Dobson, Deline, and Quinn Hughes, right? I mean, those are 4 guys right now trending for a Hall of Fame career. Or at least at a minimum, Norris be like a Norris finalist. But the forward group in that year is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Outside of Svechnikov and a couple other guys, it's really bad. We didn't foresee that. However, in 2017, we assessed 2017 as, this is a weak draft. It's top heavy. 2017 is looking like a much better draft than 2018. Yeah. So that's why you have to be careful when people say what they say. I definitely assess this draft to be average, but it's average. Why? The NTDP group isn't that great. All right. So that doesn't help. The OHL group, it could be better. The Quebec group is basically non-existent, but you have a very good Russian group. You have a very good WHL group. You're having Norwegian kids. And I actually really like the Swedish one. I think is underrated. I like this. I could go on about the Swedish group. So goaltending depth, not that bad. Again, lacking centers, that doesn't help it. But it just, 4 or 5 of these kids are going to become borderline Hall of Famers. 15 to 20 of these kids are going to become everyday top 6, top pairing, or top 4 types. So this is just how the draft always works. That's why I'm not in that. Don't like going and saying, this draft is weak. It's weak, because there's no freaking, automatic top 4 all-star like last year. It's a good crop. I think teams will definitely find at least one NHL player in this draft class as long as they play their cards right.
Yeah, and with the Flyers having potentially 4 picks, 4, definitely 3, maybe 4 picks, depending on what Columbus does with that high second-round pick. Which, quite frankly, as you're going through these names, I mean, I know that next year is going to be potentially a stronger draft, but it seems like they would have pretty good dibs at some really sizable wins there. The one guy that stuck out to me from the later half of your draft, who I see him kind of ranked around like that 30 to 40 range, is Parashek. And I got to ask you, how does a guy with 43 goals, 62 assists, 105 points, plus 49, more than a point a game in the playoffs, how does he not get more attention? Is it because he's a winger? I mean, his size isn't bad at 5'11", 180 pounds. So it's not like he's small for a winger. I would say he's, about average. But that's that's like mimicking Berkeley Catton's numbers to some degree. Why is somebody like that not getting more attention? Because he's really the first time I've heard his name, kind of pointed out as a potential, top 25 player, top 20 player.
Well, he got off to a hot. I love him. Like I said, I got him in my first round, and I think he's the kind of guy that we got to be careful
good numbers.
Yeah, like this is the kind of guy that Carolina will draft, right? Like they don't care. Like Carolina is always big on no on I would say on numbers. Like there's a lot more to the process, but guys that put up big numbers, high yield offense, they've been drafting those guys in the later. Yeah, like they don't care about size, they don't care about skating as much. Like they care about.
Are you producing? Then let's take him, right?
Producing, but also like, maybe there's a lot more to like how they fit within a certain system, etc. Harasic to me is just a phenomenal player. I mean, he's got like very quick hands. So if you look at a possession in the offensive zone, it's on his stick, it's off his stick, and then bam, it's in the back of the net. And it could be with the shot, it could be with the pass. I've seen people knock his skating. I don't have a freaking problem with it. And the thing is this about skating. Skating is so overrated. I'm not going to repeat myself like I did on the other podcast, but skating matters to an extent. But we're watching games right now played in close quarters, right? Like that's where the key decisions are made, and he makes really great decisions under pressure. So, I think Basha is another kid who put up big numbers this year. He was Caden Lindstrom's line mate was a Medicine Hat. With Basha, all right, you might be worried about, he forces plays, and he's a little, sometimes he passes too much, but you're looking at high yield offensive talent, and although you have to reward the others, and there's reasons why we make our rankings the way that they do, and really a lot of it is just watching a kid. And he hits you hard when you're watching him. You're like, man, this kid is great. And he never deviates from that. So I think Parasic, for me, has never deviated. I just have to, like, as my season progressed, I had to, like the Eriksson and Pedersen kids, when I found out that they were, to a degree, more so Pedersen, man on an island. And then you see Eriksson going to the Allsvenskan playoffs and playing with another freaking draft -1 is his wing, and they're freaking scoring and making plays. That kind of like helped me a lot. So put them ahead of Parasic. But I mean, he's a wing with center tendencies. I just think that WHL kid, what's there not to like? But if you didn't have all these defensemen, where does he go? I'd say probably middle, like late teens, early 20s, which is fair.
Yeah, I mean, so the guy Zetterberg that you brought up, I mean, that seems like a Denver Barkey type of pick, like a guy who's probably going to drop because of his size, but
he's really small. Really small. He's going to have to add muscle. He is not. I understand why. First of all, like Central Scouting, and the league, Florida's last 2 playoff runs, Vegas winning the Cup, St. Louis in 2019, even Tampa, and the size of their defense. Like this is the way the league is trending. They want a big is better, big is back. They like little smaller players. I think centers in particular under 6 feet were almost halved in Central Scouting's rankings. Like they like if you're 5'9", 5'8" center, 3 years ago was your halcyon day. This is no longer the it's basically we're in the swan song, I guess, for smaller players for this particular period. So you have a lot of guys. Zetterberg, like I said, he's just very small.
Yeah.
But Marty St. Louis, we look at the little guys, Tyler Johnson, that these guys could develop strength. They could improve their balance. They could improve their courage level and willingness to take a hit and not play in the perimeter. And so we'll see how Zetterberg does in college. It's going to be a big step up, but I never got the sense that he was a player who was a perimeter player. But I'm being very generous with the ranking. I admit it.
But sometimes, though, that's how you can overlook guys potentially, right? If you're just looking at size, just because they're small doesn't mean they're not going to contribute. To your point, there's things they have to do, but I mean, you never know once they put that strength on, once they get some more experience, how it might turn out. I'm interested, Steve, just on your thoughts, some more thoughts maybe on Consta Helenius.
Read my mind.
I'm really high on Helenius personally. Like,
as am I.
I think would be a great pick potentially for the Flyers, and I'm seeing so many rankings that have him outside the top 10, where personally I would have had him probably as a top 10 pick, especially with playing against men in Liga as well. I just feel like maybe he's being underrated. So can you speak to maybe his game and things like that?
And just to add to that, like, what's his offensive ceiling? Because I'm hearing second line center, but again, I see a guy who's proficient at both ends of the ice with quite frankly, I looked at his numbers, and for a guy that age to be producing at the rate that he's producing, I mean, that's a top 5 pick
against men too.
Yeah,
right?
from sheer production value. But then I'm hearing his offensive production is not that high because his tournaments haven't been full of offensive production in the same sense. But he produced better against men than he did against players, around his age.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope. You know what I mean? Like when you're going to base it off of that, you definitely want to see consistency, but it's not the end all be all. When I did my research on Hellenius, besides watching him and being impressed with everything that he did, and the IQ and the playmaking, the like pass accuracy, just the way he handled the neutral zone. Like, if we're going to talk about analytics and entries and exits and other stuff like that, like this kid knows how to enter the zone. He knows how to do it. He'll find a way to do it. And if he doesn't do it himself, he will find the guy that is wide open that no one else is expecting to be open to make things, begin the possession in the other end. So I crunched the numbers, and his assist per game ratio was the highest in the SM Liga since Barkov. That's a pretty long stretch.
I saw that.
Right? It's about 11 years, right? 11 seasons and no Finnish draft prospect. And they've had good ones, right? Rantanen, Lundell. None of them produce like this. So again, we learned all lessons. We should be learning all lesson though with Kakaniemi and Capo Caco, because they also produced against men, right, in their draft year, and it hasn't been very good in the NHL. And they were very high. They were drafted very high, but I'm not going to really concern myself with that too much, because when I watched him play in big games in league play, especially in the playoffs, you saw the high-end skill. So who cares if he – first of all, at the U18 Worlds, he was creating plays like crazy. He hit posts. He was making plays. Like, he basically was – he was added to the team last minute. He was the top-line center. When he went to the World Juniors, it was a different story. He was the youngest player on the team. And he was the top line center there. Then they removed him off the top line. So that created this narrative like, oh, he got demoted. He's not worthy. Like, shut up. Yes, he is worthy. He's a very good player. And this is what the World Juniors kind of does, is that once people get anchored to that belief, like, oh, he didn't play well in the tournament, and oh, he didn't light it up at the U18 Worlds. Well, let's just forget about what he did the regular season and the league play in the playoffs. So I'm very high on him. I have him ranked, like I said, I got him friggin' 5th.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that the potential for points there, and the added bonus for him is that he plays a North American style. He'll chip and chase. He doesn't. It's not like he's on the perimeter and he's a finesse guy where he's avoiding contact. Like, this guy will chip and chase. He'll get to the defenseman to turn his back, and then he will hound him. And like, not necessarily always out muscle him. That comes with time. But I don't know. I don't recommend doubting him. I really don't, based on the fact that he was not productive enough or effective enough at a 2-week tournament in December, and that his team got beat by the Americans at the U18s, and it happens. You know what I mean? So, yeah, obviously I'm a big fan.
Well, I think if anything, right, like teams not looking at the bulk of the play, like the season, the playoffs, that's kind of a mistake, right? Because for a player,
they look at that. They look at everything.
No, of course. And for a player, you have to imagine that, like, okay, these tournaments mean something, but I was playing all year with my team in Liga to try to make it to the playoffs. So obviously that's going to be a big, important thing too, that players are going to be invested in. So I think you got to look at both. And just because, let's say, a tournament didn't work out or didn't like the page on 5 doesn't mean the guy doesn't, deserve to be a top 10 pick. So I totally agree.
Yeah, people just got to be consistent. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to knock a kid for not showing up, Caden Lindstrom, right? What did he do in the playoffs? He did zilch, all right? But they're making excuses for him. Oh, well, he was rusty and he was hurt. That's totally fair, but he did not show up in the playoffs. He did not. Now, he had a couple of chances, but he had 1 assist in 4 games. Can you imagine if Mitchkov had 1 assist in a playoff series in like 5 last year? Oh my, dropped to the 3rd round.
He'd be the biggest bust of all time.
Exactly. So remember that. Like, and the thing is, Hellenius produced in the playoffs. He was very effective. They were going for a championship. They were one of the top teams. I mean, Topero was like the big powerhouse. So like, I don't know if anybody was going to beat them. But the point stands that, let's be fair. if we're going to knock a kid because he didn't perform in a tournament, but he did well in the playoffs and the league play, then what about the other prospects you got ranked ahead of him who also didn't well? What it is? You want to defer to size? That's fine. Just be careful with that because a lot of teams have paid a heavy price for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Vasili and I kind of talked about who we would want. I think our list was pretty similar, Vasili, if I remember correctly. And like, we don't know.
And Hellenius were my top two.
Around
when the Flyers picked.
And then I had Berkeley Catton in there because we have no idea where these guys are going, right? Like, I look at these lists.
No.
So Berkeley Catton was one of the guys, at least from the offensive side. Defense we could talk about afterwards, but I do think that defense probably will go earlier. You know, to your point, I mean, we've seen that in the past when D is strong. NHL teams tend to go for that because it's really hard to find top three, top pairing defensemen. But what is the deal with Berkeley Catton? I mean, the guy's lights out statistically.
It's just his size. It's just his size. That's all it is. It's his size. And then people try to justify.
But he's not that small. But small.
But again, like, this is when you watch again, like I really made a point I really make it a point to not listen to popular opinion, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to the draft. I don't want someone that jumps on a website for like 3 days, gets an idea, and then spits it out as like, this is what reality is. I don't like that. So I like to dig into everything. And again, I've been wrong. And like I said, I can go on to like a mission in Africa, right? Like one of those like the Christian missions, and not have any electronics. But before I leave, I write down, like a top 32, and I could come back and say, this is my top 32. It's unchanged. And if the draft goes that way, like 6 of those kids are going to be great. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how it works.
Yes.
It there's really, the analysis paralysis part of it is huge. But the idea that a kid who destroys his league in his draft season, and he's not necessarily on a team where he was surrounded by, like, you could say that there were definitely parallels to what Bedard did for Regina and what Catton did for Spokane. Now, obviously, Bedard, historic scoring numbers, right, over 2 points a game, etc. And I'm not comparing the two. All I'm saying is that it's a different game now. Like, even though we're trying to get bigger again, you still need that skill. You still need finishing. You still need whatever. So whether you are worried about the guy being able to deal with physicality, these kids are going to get bigger. They're going to put on muscles. The play development staff is going to tell them, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what we need to improve on. And that's it. So again, if you just want to point to size as being a problem, fine. Like, people always try to judge. Like, I'll be honest with you. When I look at my entire first round, outside of very valid concerns I have with Lev Shinov's decision-making and Caden Lidstrom's health and his low assist total, I don't have a problem with anybody. I really don't. I don't have a problem with any of these kids. I'm not going to try to find little tiny things wrong with them because they've pretty much all done their jobs. And in Catton's case, he was one of my top fives heading in. So I'm not going to change that when he has a 120-point season.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to change that. Because, this last 2 games, he looked a little slower or I don't like he forced pass. No, that's not how I work.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I have like a favorite. I'm like, I'm hoping this guy is available. Like, like I really loved Trevor Zegras in his draft year.
Yeah.
He might fall to us, right? Like, guys like that. I really have not been able to do that this year. Like, I see a benefit with pretty much anyone in that space.
There's a handful of guys that seem like they're going to be decent selections, right?
Right. Here's the one thing though we have to consider though, and this is problematic. And it's really just the way things happen. It's just by the way things have shaped out in the NHL standings. The same teams are picking in the top 10 and 15. The same teams year after year. It's Buffalo. It's Ottawa. Frickin' New Jersey's back picking again. Now, although New Jersey's pushed a lot of their kids through, Buffalo, Montreal, Detroit, they have not. Their systems are overloaded. So now you run the risk of a kid coming in, and he's going to be a top 5, top 7, top 11 pick. But now he's got to overtake
Yeah, tons of competition, right?
3 to 5 to 7 years of stockpiling high picks, first, second, third round picks. Those kids are going to be like, well, he was drafted higher than me, so go ahead, take my job. Like, no, that's not how it works. And so that's my concern. That's why I've been saying, in a way, like, Flyers, different story. You guys need a center. You got to go out and get yourself a center. And I'm not saying necessarily draft Fanit at 12, but after trading Gauthier and replacing him with a right defenseman, or getting a right defenseman in return, you sign Rizzo, that helped, but you need an elite center.
Center is a need for the Flyers big time.
Yeah, so that's fine for the Flyers, but all these other teams, it's going to, I think, increase the bus factor big time, because Chicago's defense is loaded. Look at their defensive depth chart under the age of 23. It is insane. Now you're going to ask a guy like Levshinov or Boyum or whomever to overtake them, even if they've got 3 or 4 years to go to catch up to them. It's very interesting to see how this draft plays out. I think that might impact its grade long term. But that being said, the ability for some of these kids to graduate and become a star based on their performance, it has not changed. It hasn't changed. They did their part. We have to reward them for that. And then it's going to be up to the teams in the beginning, and then the responsibility will fall on them to become players that live up to the expectations.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought that up. And one of the things that appeals to me about Kournianos is that he's European. And could the Flyers bring him over like now? Let's say they draft him at 12 and just put him in the top center in the AHL this upcoming year.
You gotta be careful with that, though. Gotta be careful with that. And that's the Kako situation. Kakaniemi is another one. You gotta be careful with that. Like, and I think teams know that too nowadays. Elias Anderson is another one. Yeah, where true. Like a lot of these kids were like Kravtsov. Well, Kravtsov didn't come over right away, but the European kids, and we've talked about this, how European culture is not like American culture, right? The sport culture is different.
Very different.
Hockey culture is different. So they might be in that comfort zone. Now, obviously, if there's the hunger, the desire, the drive, they don't care where they're playing. They want to play and win and become stars themselves and get paid if things work out. But that's why we're seeing the NCAA route, USHL, Canadian Junior A is going to be very prevalent in this draft as well. A lot of BCHL kids should get drafted because it's like what you said, Yariv, like you have control, but then again, you have to worry about the AHL rule that they could just come right in and play. So I would be cautious with that, but I would be surprised if he shows up next year to Lehigh Valley and he's their best center.
Yeah.
He'd have to overtake A-Bowls. He'd have to overtake A-Bowls.
Yeah, exactly.
What's
your thoughts, Steve, on Aaron Kiviharju? Because I know before the draft, he was considered potential top 10. Obviously, the injury happens, but I'm interested to hear like your thoughts on him.
I feel bad. You want the kid to succeed, but he had two, like it was almost like back-to-back. I think it was off ice too. 2 injuries off ice very early into his draft season. And unfortunately, his draft season did not start off great in terms of playing against men. And I wrote about this, and I feel bad, but I got to do it. I got to be honest. I can't sugarcoat things. You know what I mean? He looked scared to get hit, and he's a smaller guy. He's not a blazer, but he's very agile. He's got excellent footwork. With him, it's all about playmaking, processing, passing. Agility, like just smarts, overall high IQ with the puck. And when he had 2 basically catastrophic knee injuries in a short period of time, to his credit, he worked very hard to get back to game shape, and he showed up at the U18 Worlds. And I thought, all things considered, he really looked comfortable. He looked confident. He looked decisive. And there were periods where he was the best player on the ice, not just best defenseman. So that's a good sign. That's going to help him. But I don't know if teams are going to be willing to take that kind of a gamble on him, i.e. in the first round.
Right.
Like draft him in the first round, because there's a lot of question marks there. Remember, before he got hurt, it's not like he was tearing it up before he got hurt. He was like, whoa, he's a little green, maybe more time in junior, maybe going to the, like once he gets drafted. I don't know if he was a CHL import draft pick, but he could play in the CHL. Team could have a close watch on him, or if his goal is to make up for what he missed out on and think he plays for EFK, right? HIFK.
Yeah, exactly.
So he could play for them, and I don't want to blame him for his injury, but in a way, like make amends, like kind of like make people forget about the unfortunate draft season of his. But first round, it's hard because he just wasn't that much better than a lot of these kids. He was even at best, and he doesn't have
knee
size.
Injuries, right? Too as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't have size. He's like 5'10".
Do you think potentially he's one of those guys that, like, let's say selected second round, even drops to the third round, that might be one of those sleeper picks down the line?
Well, I mean, he was once heralded as the Rasmus Dahlin of Finland, and they thought he was going to be challenging Yzerman and Celebrini, for first overall. But it's hard to call him a sleeper because he's very well known. But I would say that he's the kind of draft pick for one of two teams, right? Either a team with a ton of picks and they could take a shot and let him do what he wants, or a team with absolutely nothing and they need something. They need to add a level of skill. So I think like the Canucks, for example. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go. I think the Canucks will pick him to the third round. But let's just say, or Edmonton, right, where Bo Akey had an injury too. Maybe they'd be adverse to drafting another kid with an injury. But like teams like that, like the Islanders, right? And this is
might as well take a shot because he could have high end skill we could capitalize on, right?
Exactly, and you can be patient with him because you're a halfway decent team, right? Like in Edmonton, Vancouver's case, you're contenders. Islanders' case, they might be one or two players away from getting back to where they were. So, but yeah, it's a tough break for him, but adapt and overcome.
So what do you? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. Okay, yeah,
No,
go ahead. Do you want to? Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about like sleepers and things like that. Do you think, Steve, like who would you look at coming up in this draft that might be some, picks that could be sleepers that we should kind of know about or be aware of?
All right. Well, I mean, we could have a whole podcast on this one because, just go to my Swedish dump, 100 scouting reports of like kids. But I'll talk about kids that barely got talked about. And if they did, either not ranked by Central Scouting, or if they were, it was like kind of low. So there's a kid out of Finland named Tony Niemann who plays for HIFK, and he impressed the heck out of me. He was a kid that I felt should have gotten recognition from Central Scouting. They never did. He's a first-year eligible. All his team's defensemen weren't that good in the U20 level, and he was good. So he's a kid to keep an eye on. Russia's always a good place for sleepers, right? Where does Panarin come from? Why don't we know about him? There were two goalies this year. They got pelted on a nightly basis. The kid Obvintsev from Siska Junior, Krasnaya Armia. And Krasnaya Armia is usually a good team in the Russian Junior League. They were not good. They were rebuilding. But he was facing like 37, 38 shots a game. So I see him, and he's got size. He's like 6'2", 6'3". So he'll get drafted. And then the other kid was, what the heck was his name? Zarubin, Kirill Zarubin. Literally faced 40 shots a game. Literally faced 40 shots a game. So, you look at Zev Ragin, the Flyers have been tapped into the Russian goalie market. Those are the two kind of kids. There are a bunch of Russian goalies. Central Scouting only put, I think, one or two Russian goalies on their final European list, and they actually made it bigger this year. They had I think like 15 prospects on it, but there should be about 30 Russian goalie prospects on it. So there's a couple of defensemen out of the BCHL actually there's three. They're big, they're physical, and they're mean. And they got pretty good hands. Luke Ashton is one of them. He's an overager. Played for Langley. Then there was Keith McInnes. I don't think he's related to any of the Marty or Al McInnes, but he's a massive open ice hitter. This kid's a decent skater, and he gets some wind behind him, and he could really drill people. And then the other guy is Matt Leahy. Now, Leahy isn't as like violently angry as the other two, but he played for a team that really needed his help. He was a number one defenseman. And so these are college bound guys. They're all massive. They're all like 6'3", 6'2", 6'3". I think Ashton is like 6'7". So those are kids that you're going to see teams want to target them. And, you look at Vincent Desharnais, who, when he was drafted by Edmonton in 2016, I was asked about him. I'm like, well, what are the chances of him making it? And 6th round pick. I think he was a 1-year overager. And he was in the NHL. He's playing for Edmonton. So big defenseman, as much as we like to kind of complain about how they shouldn't be taken over skill. Round 1, I agree, absolutely, although Salayev is the exception. But like those kind of players. And then there's a kid in Sweden. I don't know why he wasn't ranked, but he wasn't. And his name is Hjalti Thompson. Hjalte. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Hjalti or Halti. He is Danish. And he played for Malmo, which is the same team that Badinka was on. So I went to go watch Malmo because of Badinka. Badinka's a high-level prospect. And this kid, top-line left wing, stole the show. Completely stole the show, did everything. Pass, a hustle, skate, you name it, good size. Then he played so I tracked him. Then he went to play for Denmark at the D1A World U20, the World Juniors for the 2nd division. Yeah. One of the best players in the tournament. So he Central Scouting, nothing, not in the watch list, no, nothing, not even a peep about him. I think that doesn't stop him from getting drafted. So
that's a good one. I like
it. Yeah, and then
there's some guys to keep an eye on.
Yeah. The last guy I'll say, I'm not going to call him a sleeper because Central Scouting had him ranked pretty high, but I could see this guy becoming one of the better players in the draft, at least within a couple of years. And when the World Juniors happens, people are like, oh, who is this guy? Miroslav Holinka, not Holinka, Holinka. He's a center, played for Trinets in the extra liga, but I think he played more in the U20 league. Dual threat, great puck skill, everything you want in a number one center, everything you want. Passing, first guy in on the forecheck, then steals the puck and then starts to cycle himself, doesn't need help, etc. So those just we could do this for freaking days.
Those are awesome. I do have a question on another guy that I don't believe you brought him up, but he has made mock drafts like top 32. You're gonna obviously, I believe you're gonna know who this guy is. Dean Latenru, I believe is how you say his name.
Yeah.
Laterno, 6'7", absolutely destroyed
St. Andrews College
his league. Yeah. I don't know what to make of this kid. It seems like on paper there's something there, but then I also don't trust, the league that he's playing in and whatnot. And I don't trust the fact that people are overvaluing his size. But if he does turn out, it's like 6'7".
Definitely worth it. Yeah.
Is this a Tage Thompson type of player?
I mean, he's like, to me, when I think of comparables, I think Ratcliffe. Of like Mike Rasmussen, right?
Okay.
Kid that went high for Detroit. Tampa Bay's got a prospect they took in the 2nd round a couple years ago named Jack Finley. He's in Syracuse now. He's actually one of their better prospects, but he's again big, like playmaker. Oh, the thing about when you see these big kids play, right? Speaking of sleeper, there's another kid, Tobias Pitka. He wasn't ranked. He's going to Boston College next year. I think Laterno's going to BU.
Yeah,
right. So they'll be playing against each other one of these days. But Tobias Pitka is a Slovak kid, very very hard worker. Right, quick hands, but a lot of these big kids don't skate all that well. So you wonder, what can they play with pace? Is the NHL game, is the AHL game going to be humbling for them, where they lose their confidence and now you're worrying about whatever? With Laterno, he's good. I'm not really worried about I got him in the mid-2nd round,
okay,
and I can see why a team would be willing to gamble on him in the 1st round. Because you could see he's going to get stashed away. He's going to get better in college. I don't know if he'll ever be like a franchise kind of caliber center, but I could see him being as a very good 3rd-line center. So like, look at what the Boston Bruins did with Trent Frederick, right? That was a very controversial pick at the time. I didn't think so because I watched Frederick as the number 2 center for that NTDP behind Clayton Keller. This is when Clayton Keller played center. And I said, oh, Frederick, he's headed to Wisconsin. He's pretty good, this is Frederick. But Bruins fans were so mad. They were so angry and mad about the pick. For years, they were angry about it. But, you watch so John Beecher would be another guy, another Bruins pick.
I like
big
feature.
physical center. So I think that there would be justification for taking a late first round flyer on this kid. I'm not, if the Rangers need a center, if they draft him, I'm not going to be upset about it. But we just have to let this really play out. And but he's not devoid of skill, and he's not devoid of IQ. Like he is a very good prospect who deserves to be in the conversation. I just, like I said, I like to reward some of the smaller guys because of the quality competition and the like, you know, big moments, more people in the stands, etc.
Do you think you have to be wary sometimes, Steve, like with the bigger guys, just because at a lower level or like coming up here, they might be playing against players that they're a lot bigger than, a lot stronger than, in a sense?
I'm not necessarily worried about size, either side. I care more about adaptability on the situation they're going to face when they get to camp, development camp, and when they get to whatever. Because all these kids have been the top dog everywhere they've been. But when they get to development camp, no one's going to be freaking holding their hand. No one's going to be like giving them special treatment because you're a first round pick or you're, you know, whatever. Like it becomes Lord of the Flies, basically.
Yeah, competition, like, exactly.
Yeah, like you know. So how they handle that, and how they handle the media scrutiny. Forget about the public scrutiny. Hopefully they're trained to deal with that because we're never going to shut up. But the media scrutiny, like, remember, Frank Saravalli was like, "Is Alexei Lafreniere a bust?" This season, he wrote that. This season,
yeah. Look at the playoffs, right?
And while he was having a very good season, so maybe he should have watched, you know, Lafreniere play before he said that. But the point stands that, you know, this is the things that the kids have to deal with. So to answer your question, I don't think that, like, when they get to where they get to, the size matters really at all, unless it's pretty obvious that they cannot handle a forecheck. If they're a defenseman because of their size, they have no balance. If they're, you know, they're a perimeter player, that you sneeze on them, they fall down, which is a problem that Zetterberg kind of deals with sometimes. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but I'm telling you right now, the league is trending towards bigger players. We're heading there. We're already on that way. But now the next couple of draft classes, it's going to be big, physical. You know, so but I can't help not rewarding the smaller guys for what they accomplished.
So I want to head back up to the I guess the top 15 again, and two players that we kind of brushed over them a little bit, even though you did. I think we've talked about him before, but so Boyum is a player I almost hope falls to the Flyers. I do look at his size and stuff. I'm like, okay, you know, he does seem a little comparable to Cam York or whatnot. But do you think there is a chance that he even falls to 12 just because of the, again, I'm biased. I'm Israeli. I would love to see an Israeli Flyer. So I have that where I'm like, it would be so cool. Having said that, I love all these guys. So I wouldn't be like disappointed if he goes somewhere else. But is he a guy who would even drop to 12? From what I can see, probably not, just because, again, the defenseman bias. And I do think that that'll play a role here. And then the other question is about Yzerman. And, you know, I'd like to know a little bit more about his shortcomings. And also, does his age play a role into his upside? Because I do know he has a later birthday. He kind of just missed the next draft. And he's producing at such a high rate that I'm kind of like, is there a little immaturity there potentially? Because, you know, maybe he's like 5-6 months, you know, younger than some of his counterparts. Like, is that playing a role into it?
All right, so the first part about Boyum is, I mean, I got him ranked. He's my second defenseman ranked after Salaya.
Right.
So I'm a huge fan. And for all the talk about Lev Shinov and how important he was to freaking Michigan State, look at what Boyum did for freaking Denver, and they won the damn title. Right. Okay, he was huge for them in the NCHC playoffs. Size was not an issue. I mean, he's 6 foot, right? So, but he's, again, the college game did not intimidate him. He was a late birthday. He played for the NTDP. We knew he was special. So coming into the next season, the concern, or the development, not the development, the concern was his size. Okay, that you want to see how would he respond to this uptick in speed, and whatever. And remember that the NTDP plays against college teams, so he had that experience with them already. But and Denver has Sean Behrens on the team, and he's a hard hitter, and he plays a physical game. And I always felt that Behrens was like their undisputed number one. He already won a title with them 2 years ago. But to me, Boyum was their best defenseman this year. Now, again, not knocking Behrens, because I love Behrens. He's going to be a very good player. But to be the best defenseman on the best team in the country, to be the top scoring defenseman in the country while you're the best defenseman on the best team in the country, like, dude, I mean, enough said. Like, why overthink it? Why overthink it? Yeah, okay, at the World Juniors, he had turnovers. He made me, as an American, I was a little frustrated with him a couple of times. But still, he showed up for the big games. He was good in the gold medal game. I think he scored a goal in the gold medal game against Sweden. Well, he made like a really big play in a clutch moment. So I'm definitely on board with Boyum. I don't think that anyone should have those concerns. But does he slip and fall because of his size? I would not be surprised. Okay, I would not be surprised if he's the last defenseman taken out of the group.
Yakimchuk being 6'3", Dickinson being 6'3",
Dickinson, even Perek, and Salayev and
obviously
Levchinov.
Salayev's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Rasmus Sandin had the same kind of knock on him when he was drafted, and he went all the way down late in the first round in 18, but he ended up becoming a pretty good NHL defenseman. So that's just one example of like size. Of course, Quinn Hughes wasn't the biggest guy. Adam Fox, definitely not the biggest guy. So we have to be careful with that, especially when these guys have elite IQ, elite creativity, elite mobility in like every direction. And plus, Boyum is not afraid of physical contact. So I'm hoping scouts, to me, it's a no-brainer. He's better than Levchinov. He's better than Levchinov. If you want to say that Levchinov has the size, Boyum had the better draft -1 season. Boyum had the better NCAA season. To me, it's no contest. So, but the scouts do their thing for the reason they do their things. To answer the second question about Yzerman, now the thing about Yzerman that bothers me more than anything else is he's very cocky. Okay, and not cocky like I want to be the best. Like it's almost like he refers to himself in the third person. Something like, well, Cole Yzerman's here to score goals, and so it's like I get it. And the thing is, when I watched him, I scrutinized his play a lot. He was my preseason number one. I had him at Celebrini. So when I saw Celebrini play as well as he did in the beginning, I'm like, okay, do I have to rank this guy ahead of my number one? Let me see. And when I watched Yzerman, all I saw was a kid that shoots the puck. That's it. He shoots the puck. That's all he does. He stands still and he shoots the puck. And then when the criticism started, then we started seeing him throw his weight around more, try to pass the puck more. But even still in that window, he still showed the same tendencies. Now, the only reason why he should be a high pick is because he is a phenomenal goal scorer. You are not drafting him to play defense. You're not drafting him to do anything but score goals, okay? So, Ovechkin, from all the way down to freaking Mike Hoffman, okay? That these guys that blast the puck from a standstill are good at it. Brett Hull did it. So I'm not saying that Yzerman is going to be the next Ovechkin. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Hoffman. But Cole Caulfield did not play like that his draft year. Cole Caulfield was very, very involved. He tried his best, a significant size limitation, playing for the NTDP that year against college guys. But I fought people so hard over that. They're like, he's too small. He's too small. I'm like, dude, as an elite goal scorer, who cares? But he never gave us a reason. He never gave me a reason to think, Caulfield, that is, never gave me a reason to think that, I don't think this is going to translate to the NHL, when a lot of people were saying that. Friggin' scouts used to tag, like, why are you so high on Caulfield? Why'd you call me an idiot? And I'm like, dude, the kid's money. And this is about being right or wrong. All I'm saying is that when you look at what Caulfield does, at the end of the day, everything else shouldn't matter. I can't help but be bothered when a kid is interviewed and they're like, hey, what about your game? He's like, I'm just here to score goals. like I would like to have seen or heard or read more humility out of him. Where like, I really want to help the team win. I'll do whatever it takes to win. I know that my goal scoring is important. Again, I don't know. He is who he is. So I don't want the kid to change necessarily, but when I'm ranking kids, I'm allowed to be bothered by something. Yeah. And that kind of bothered me a little bit. So he never, but again, to his credit, he never freaking deviates from it. And he still scores goals. He never deviates. It's not like he's like, I'm going to try to reinvent myself. There are games that he tries to throw hits. They're so uncoordinated and like unstrategic. Is that a word?
He would drive Tortorella insane.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Do you ever hear the story of Latrell Sprewell and how he got choked? Well, he choked his head coach.
No.
All right. So I'm going to go real quick on this. One of the best basketball players in the league was Latrell Sprewell in the late 90s. And he was literally one of the best players in the league. No other way you could describe him. Well, his coach was PJ Carlesimo, who came from college to coach the NBA. And he played for the Golden State Warriors, and the Warriors were an embarrassment at the time. Well, Carlesimo came into the gym one day and was yelling at Sprewell for not practicing hard enough. And Sprewell was just shooting around. He was literally practicing, but just shooting around. So Carlesimo apparently kept on walking into the gym and like cursing at him, dropping the F-bombs, like saying, you better do better. You better do better. You better do better. And, Sprewell literally, again, one of the best players in the league. He's yelling at him. And finally, Sprewell turned to him and said, if you don't shut up, I'm going to, beat the snot out of you. And next thing you know, Carlesimo comes in. He says it. Sprewell, I think, threw the ball at him, ran at him, and started choking him in front of the whole team. Was choking him and would not let go. And apparently he was kicking him while he was choking him. So that shows how much hatred he had for this coach who was all over him. Now, I'm not saying that Cole Eiserman is going to do that to Tortorella. It would be funny as heck if it did happen to a degree. But I think that, like you said,
that relationship would be interesting. That's for sure.
Players like that, who as great as they are and rely on their talent and whatever, like you have to be careful with that. And again, I've said this on previous podcasts with you guys. Tortorella is not the long-term solution here in Philadelphia. Okay. He was here, and I don't want to write the guy's pink slip, and I could be mistaken. And I'm a huge Torts fan.
You're not the only one saying this. So
yeah, like he was brought in to set a standard, right? And he's done a good job of it, I think. All right, with LePerrier down in Lehigh Valley towards the NHL, their methods are weird, perplexing, like the benchings and calling people out in the media. I get it. But the older I get, the more I realize you could handle that in a different way. But like Eiserman for the Flyers, the only reason why I would even consider it is the power play is so abhorrently historically bad that they might view him and his shot from the circle as the X factor. And that, like the Capitals, when they got Ovechkin and finally got him, added Backstrom together and Mike Green and that whole crew.
Yeah.
And made the Capitals an elite power play for 15 years. If that's the intent, hey, it makes sense. But, the reality is Cole Eiserman, with all due respect to him, is pretty, I don't want to say useless, but he's pretty invisible when he's not scoring.
He's very one-dimensional player.
He's just one-dimensional.
Yeah,
he's just one-dimensional.
Which is risky, right? Because you never know if teams figure out how to defend against that. Is he going to be able to reinvent himself? We haven't seen that. So,
but like with Ovechkin and Brett Hull, you knew it's coming.
That's true.
You know it's coming. So does he know how to get open? So when I say one-dimensional, he's a smart player.
Yeah, exactly. You got to find those soft spots on the ice, right?
So. But he's going to go to college, right? And he's going to a very, very intense program with goals to win a national championship. He's going to be surrounded by a lot of talent. So if he's referring to himself in the third person, then he might show up there and be like, this is Cole Eiserman's team. Cole Eiserman wants this. It would be funny if he did. But so again, those to me are red flags. Those are red flags. If he was a demanding teammate, like, give me the puck. I don't have a problem with that. That means he's competitive. But if he is just like, I just want to shoot, give me the puck, and not doing anything else, the teammates will be like, oh, wait a minute now, dude, come on. But all this said, again, I'm a big fan of his shooting. I really think he's going to be a top 15 pick, and it wouldn't be a bad pick. It wouldn't be a bad pick. It would be a bad pick if he goes top 5, top 3. You're like, okay, he will not live up to that. But top 12, top 15, fine.
I'll be honest with you. Finding that out about him, about his personality, tells me that the Flyers, I would say 95% chance do not pick this guy.
Especially after the Gauthier thing too. Yeah,
exactly.
and it's not even just that. Well, I agree with that, but
he doesn't I want to say this. He doesn't have like a personality issue. Like he's a good kid. He interviews well, whatever. But it's like every time he's been asked, talk about your like whatever, he's like, I'm here to score goals. I'm here to score goals. I'm here to score goals. And I like the originality. I like the fact that it's a little bit out there, but. We're talking about the Flyers now. After what Gauthier happened, like no,
might rub them the wrong way. The way he's acting, right?
Yeah, it's. I think it also does.
Maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much. I don't know, but
look.
Even if we forget about the comments, it's still the fact he just stands still and shoots the puck.
Well, the whole thing. It doesn't seem to fit. Like, forget Tortorella. It doesn't seem to fit the guys above Tortorella. Briere. If you look at Briere's past, you look at Keith Jones, the type of personality these guys have, Patrick Sharp, even John LeClaire, who was not a high-end pick and, got moved around. Like, these guys were all guys who worked for it. Like, they brought these guys in for a reason. They covet Scott Lawton for this reason, Nick Seeler for these reasons. And to I don't get that sense that Michkov is like that at all. I get the sense that actually Michkov is pretty humble for a guy,
a very hard worker.
Yeah,
and again, and to your point too, like you already have Michkov, so like why like unless you feel like Yzerman is going to be hit the NHL ice sooner, why would you run the risk of now Yzerman's going to show up to a team where he's literally not the best goal scorer, right?
Exactly.
So he's been the best goal scorer everywhere he's been. With all due respect, Cole Yzerman, you're not mad at Michkov, at least not at least not now. So you run the risk of having these two guys, and although Michkov is a phenomenal playmaker, and after watching Michkov play, like he'll be more than happy to feed him the puck if winning was the end state. It's not a good fit. It's not a good fit.
I'd rather see a guy like Berkeley Catton or Consta Helenius play.
Yeah.
I think a center is more of a fit just by need, but also like. You have that center who feeds the winger, and the play styles mesh together. Whereas, like the play styles of an Yzerman and a Michkov almost kind of combat each other in a sense.
I'll be honest. It seems to me like Berkeley Catton on paper to me seems like the perfect fit for what the Flyers are looking for, a replacement for Claude Giroux, quite frankly. Yeah. But if you look, I don't know this because I don't know these players like you do, Steve. But if Consta Helenius has the ability to put 80 plus points in the NHL, right? If this pace that he's on is not a coincidence and he really is, a Sasha Barkov type of player, right? And he can be a number one center and be an elite two-way player potentially, right? Even a Sean Couturier replacement down the line. Putting that with a guy like Michkov, who his defensive game is not amazing at this point, right? But his offensive game is out of this world. But that's an amazing compliment for the two. You can throw Tyson Forrester, we're in love with him here in Philly. You're talking about skating problems. That's a guy who had skating problems. And I think he's the last player on this team we would trade that's on the Flyers.
Yeah.
So like the combination of that seems like it would be phenomenal,
Definitely.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, people always talk about BPA versus need. Here's the bottom line. You don't need to go behind the scenes or read any tell-all books to know that when these teams are preparing their draft lists, they have to look at what they already have. Okay, they can't just say, "We'll just take the back." No, they have to look at what they have. They have to look at what they have at center, at wing, at either wing, at defense, and in goal. What the system looks like, what needs replenishing. You have to identify that. So there's no way that the Flyers are going to look at their, let's say, depth chart and say, well, I still think that a best player available, they see, with all due respect, again, to Owen McLaughlin and Rizzo and some of the other guys like Avon or whatever, Desnoyers, they need to compete with the guys, with the teams in the conference.
Yeah, they
start with the division, right? New Jersey's got Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, right? Washington has drafted centers like high. They drafted McMichael and LaPierre, and so you're going to have to eventually at some point contend Columbus and all the centers that they got. They got Fantilli. Yep. So, and I'm not even talking about the Atlantic Division. You're going to have to find somebody to match up to that. And with all, again, Frost is very good. He could go, he's been improving. So like maybe he'll be a number 2 center, uninterrupted with consistent scoring in, let's say, the 60 to 70 point range. But again, like the forming a lineup, you want to have every dot, every what's it called? I dotted and T crossed.
Yeah.
In that, you have a balanced lineup. And right now, the Flyers don't have an elite playmaking center prospect, right? Yeah. I mean, McLaughlin is a good center. Rizzo, they're good, but they don't have a blue chip level.
Yeah.
They had it, if you want to say, in a way, in Gauthier, but I never really considered Gauthier an elite playmaker. I didn't. I mean, he was
more of a shooter. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing if a team like the Flyers said, yeah, we're drafting for need, but we want the best available center. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You're not going to miss out by, addressing and what I think is a very critical need. But if their list has centers that they covet in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th round, they're like, oh no, these guys are future stars, then do what you got to do. But in my opinion, at 12, if the defensemen fall and they will, then you're looking at the potential of one of Lindstrom or Catton or Hellenius being available at 12, and you got to jump on that. You can't play this game. If the Flyers improve even more so next season, now you're looking at a later pick and a later pick and a later pick and a later pick every year. And listen,
it's harder to get that elite guy, right?
Like the Flyers aren't rebuilding like everybody else has been rebuilding. They're doing it kind of like piece here, piece there. They're not gutting it and saying, well, we're going to be like San Jose and we're going to get an elite Will Smith and then Celebrini, like dude, Will Smith and Celebrini back-to-back years. Flyers aren't having that. They're basically hoping that the Forsters and the Andreas or the Forsters and the Yorks and the Tuamalas and to a sense now Drysdale, like they will be form an elite core, but those guys weren't drafted very high, and history says that usually you got to get those high picks. So if a guy like Catton or Hellenius is there at 12, do not even think about taking anybody else.
Yeah.
Do not even think about it. Lindstrom, if you want to say, well, the size, okay, fine. I'll buy it. But yeah,
I would agree. I didn't hear anything about Lidstrom even coming close to being available at that range, but Catton and Hellenius were the 2 guys where I'm like, checkbox,
exactly.
We need that. And that would
what if what I said doesn't happen and the forwards go early and the team, because all those teams, right? Where was my, so Anaheim, San Jose, they're not taking a defenseman, but out of all, Anaheim does not need a defenseman. Chicago does not need a defenseman. Montreal definitely does not need a defenseman. Arizona or Utah, they just drafted Lamoureux, Duda, and that's Salayev. What's his name? Simishev.
Yeah.
In consecutive years. And they have, so it's not like if these teams like, oh, let's just get a franchise defenseman every year. And then when they're all 27 to 31 or 24 to 29, oh, bam, we have an elite defense corps, the best in the league.
Well,
so if
you go for trade,
then the Flyers might be in a situation where then the defensemen come, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to get an elite left shot or an elite right shot, because now you go like, okay, listen, we're winning. Like either way, like they don't
really have that bona fide number 1 in the system. Like they have
No.
good, decent defenseman, but nobody that projects to that level. So I think for the Flyers at 12, like it's going to be interesting depending on what happens, like whether the defense goes first or the forwards end up kind of being the heavier part of the top of the first round. But to your point, like my personal preference is they go for a center just because of the need aspect. Like they don't really have anybody that projects to be a top 2 center at this point. That's like a prospect, and I don't really consider Frost to be a prospect at this point. He's pretty
No,
well
he's established.
Exactly. So you need to add to that center depth, to your point, to be able to compete with these other teams in the division that have been adding these centers, right? Because eventually you're gonna have to match up. So for me, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think they should consider to do what they did back in the day with Richards and Carter. Go for 2 centers,
double centers,
in the first round, double it up. Maybe one of them will end up being that guy for you. And that year, it ended up being both.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying it's a 2003 draft. Don't get me wrong, but you
never know,
hope
right?
one of those 2 could end up being that guy for you, because they missed.
Well, listen, Flyers fans have every right to be, not necessarily shell shocked, but we thought that Rutsov and freaking Patrick
and O'Brien too.
Also. O'Brien, and they addressed it. You can't blame the Flyers because they at least tried. And if you want to say, well, those were need picks, well, Patrick wasn't a need pick. I mean, he was the best player available too. Exactly. Rutsov, in my opinion, was the best player available at whatever it was, 16 or 22 or whatever it was.
I think.
And then O'Brien was the extra pick. And he was the hot commodity because he was the high riser. But so I understand people are like, no, just don't draft. If we have to take another winger, do it. And I understand that, and it's fair. But I would like the concern should be that this might be the last year. I said might, so I said this might be the last year that the Flyers pick this high, and that they're happy with what they have already in the system. They're happy with the wings. They're happy to a degree with the defense. Last year and this draft will be those 2 big rebuild drafts. No need to keep doing the other teams like Detroit. Let's just do 12 picks every year for 17 years. And that, if that happens, then, you're looking at the potential for the Flyers to have a kind of an elite core and build off of that, and not necessarily needing to break it all down and draft top 5 picks every year.
Sure. All right. Any other questions about the draft?
No, I think we covered it all, and
yeah,
we got a lot of great insights. So thanks, Steve.
Yeah. All right.
No problem.
Let's move into the final 2 segments. Just want to remind everybody to please subscribe, follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating there as well. Hit the notification bell, and please make sure to subscribe. If you made it this far and you have not subscribed, please do so now. Okay, these are going to be shorter segments, but we have the Memorial Cup that just ended a couple weeks ago now. I guess just quick thoughts on Barkey and Bonk. They went far. They're probably not going to be in the NHL. I know a lot of Flyer fans have been kind of talking about them being in the NHL next year. Definitely don't anticipate that with Barkey. I could see Bonk getting a long look, but I anticipate he's probably going back as well. What can you give us on your thoughts on those 2 guys?
Well, they had a phenomenal OHL run, and London, I mean, really, they were like the 2007 Patriots, 18-0. I mean, 18-1. But you know what I mean? Heading into the OHL playoffs, it wasn't like they had scary moments all that much. Some teams gave them a little bit of.
They were the favorites, right? Essentially.
Yeah. So Barkey, first year post draft, 100 points. Playing in the top 6. They rotated the lines quite frequently. So sometimes he's playing with Gowan, sometimes he's playing with Gazazov, Haltonen. It was. But with all that talent around, he was an elite penalty killer. So it was a phenomenal season for Barkey. And then he had a great OHL playoff. Memorial Cup, I don't know if it was it was fatigue. He made some nice plays. But specifically in the final, that was probably his quietest game. He didn't do a whole lot in the final game against Saginaw. Whereas Bonk was just lights out from beginning to end. What I liked about Bonk, and this is why Dickinson is going to definitely be like high. I think it's not really recency bias because Dickinson's been good all year, but the Dickinson Bonk pairing was whoo. I mean, you're looking at that's like an all-star game, which is pretty much what London was all year. So Bonk can do no wrong in my mind. I mean, he rarely does wrong on the ice. The only thing that sucks for him is that he was on the ice, the own goal at the World Juniors, and then he's on the ice for that crushing goal against. Not that it was really well. The own goal is. I mean, he did it, but like you can't blame him. Like, oh, he made a bad play. Because that was, I think was it McHugh that had the turnover, the lob, the high lob turnover that got picked off by Saginaw, and then they score. Like, that's crushing.
Yeah.
But they were down 3-0 in the final, and they came back, and Barkey didn't let his foot off the pedal, and Bonk was part of the reason why they were able to come back and tie it. So, it's a disappointing end to the season for them. It's got to kill them. The London Knights don't have many fans outside of London, so it's not like people in the OHL are like, oh damn, I wish London won.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is what you want out of your top prospects. What I like about Barkey is this. Like, here's the way you gotta look at Barkey. Barkey it's almost like identical to Frost, where Frost, except Frost is the center, but when Frost was on the Sioux, and he had like his 60-point season, people were like, well, he played in a really great team, and that was why he did it, and that's why he didn't go higher, is because he's on a great team and blah blah blah. Then the next season comes and Frost explodes, and everyone's like, oh well, he plays in a great team and this and that, whatever. But then what happened the next season? Everybody left, Frost stayed behind, he had another 100-point season. And so I think Barkey's the kind of player where, because of his intangibles, his penalty killing, his vision, his skill, his ability to make plays out of the corner. Like, how many times did you see Barkey battle someone bigger, right? Win the battle and make a setup to lead to a goal. Like, that is not something that everyone can do.
Lots of tenacity.
So I don't want to say that he's a special player, but he's definitely looking like a freaking steal at, third round, late third round or whatever it was. And then Bonk, listen, they're both going to return to London next year. They're both not old enough to be in the AHL. So just World Juniors again. Get ready to hear that all that stuff, and wait for them to finally graduate. Maybe play a little bit in the Lehigh Valley if they're in the playoffs. Hopefully, frickin' what's his name, LePerrier doesn't stifle their creativity and skill.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah, that's what you gotta hope. But they both had incredible seasons. So I mean,
Yeah.
obviously a positive, and even for a guy like Barkey, just to see him build on the prior season, where was even still a really good season, it kind of just shows the potential. But heartbreaking, obviously, to go to Memorial Cup finals twice and lose both times. That team in London, they're probably just like, man, when are we gonna get this one, right?
Yeah, I know. It's tough because they really did play like basically perfect hockey for
Pretty much
99% of the season.
Yeah.
And then, listen, I'm going to go on a soapbox for about 30 seconds. Okay. They got to get rid of the stupid host city automatically gets to be in the freaking Memorial Cup. You take three champions who earned it, and the team that's like, oh, well, we have a new rink, so we get to be the champion. No, it is the most. I can't even find the word. It frustrates me that these guys get 2 months off or a month off or whatever it is. Remember, it was a couple of years ago. One of the teams had like 3 months or 2 months off, or they didn't even make the playoffs, and they won the damn thing. So
fair.
I don't like that. I don't like that the host city automatically gets in. I understand they do it because of attendance and they want the arena packed and whatever. But it really is a shame. Now, London, you should have beat them. You should have beat a team that you had no problem beating before. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. They get home advantage too.
Oh my god, it's so annoying.
Well, they used to do the same thing.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine like the Super Bowl goes to the team that is hosting?
Oh my god,
you're automatically in the Super Bowl, or you're automatically in the conference championship because you have a new host.
They used to do the same shit with the Euro Cup, right? Like for soccer, the host team would always get a buy-in.
All they have to do
that anymore.
Take the team with the best record who lost in the finals, and then have a tie-breaking system. So whomever lost the Q final or the dub or the O. They're the fourth team, and put it in a nice fancy place like Toronto or Montreal or wherever. Well, I mean, they're worried about the NHL, taking over, but and then promoters like that for a whole 2 years or a year. But and it was in Saginaw. It was in America. So you have an American team in Michigan winning the Memorial Cup that didn't win any of the championships.
It's a little backwards. Just
a
little bit.
Is. Get rid of it. Change it.
So we talked about Barkey and Bonk. Now the other guy that, look, we talked about his teammate. Flyers fans have heard the name quite a bit about Massimo Rizzo. He had some great numbers in his overager years here in the NCAA. Nobody really knows too much about him. Nobody really knows how to project him really well, how good he could possibly be. We don't even really know if he's going to be a center at the pro level. Maybe at the AHL level, but we're not sure about the NHL level. If he even can make it there as well. Again, he was a later pick, kind of, made a name for himself. So, Steve, as somebody who's, kind of watched him over the years, what can you tell us about Rizzo, and how does he project, and is he really a center?
Oh, he's a center. He's definitely a center. And he's a good playmaker, and he's got a good frame, and he's won big, right? So talking about Denver.
Yeah.
I think what happened was, I don't know the specifics. I don't know if Carolina told him, like, hey, man, we drafted you. We're happy with your development, but we have no room for you. Or if he saw the writing on the wall and said, this is way too many bodies here. And, Carolina doesn't promote their guys that much. Like, they really don't. They've been going veteran. Poor Jack Drury. Jack Drury finally made it.
Gotten a shot, and it took him a while, right?
Yeah, so Jack Drury was a regular this year after he was drafted in 2018. So I think Rizzo was obviously behind him, Ryan Suzuki, like going on the list of Carolina center prospects. Whereas Rizzo, he's a late round pick, but he did his job. So I think if he looked at the Flyers, or his agent looked at the Flyers and was like, or Carolina looked at the Flyers. Now remember that these are division rivals, in the same division, so it's those deals don't always happen. But he is definitely ready for the next step in his development. He's got nothing left to prove in college. He was definitely one of the better players in the NCHC. He was definitely a key guy for Denver. Denver had a lot of talent. He always had at least one sniper on his wing, and he worked well with him. Brink should know all about him, right? Because they were teammates there. And so it was free. It was a free. Or did they pay a was it a signing or a trade? I forgot.
It was a trade that was supposed to be the D'Angelo trade, and then they ended up trading Rizzo over after.
Yeah, they didn't allow them to trade D'Angelo because technically he was a member of Carolina within the same year, some sort of rule.
So they had to buy out D'Angelo, and then they ended up trading him Rizzo for nothing.
Like a pick or something.
All right.
Yeah.
So the fact that, like, all right, so you're going to put him ahead of McLaughlin because he's older, and McLaughlin is probably going to be in college at least 2 more years. So now he's going to go to the AHL. I don't think that Rizzo is going to be a guy that we could pencil into the lineup, the Flyer lineup next season. And I'm pretty sure that LePerrier can't wait to get his hands on. can't wait to get his hands on him and see if he's tough enough, right? If he's going to be tough enough to deal with it. And I think he is a guy that he could deal with physicality, battling in the boards, like going to the net and things like that. But it's not a very deep system, and he's going to be behind guys that have been through the Lehigh Valley process already, right? So where does he fit in? Now we talk about the wing position, right? So you're gonna have to play him at wing, because if you play him at wing, you give him a better chance to play, because if you can't have him as your 4th line center, because you just got, like I said, A-Bowles is there. You got Avon. Avon's playing center, right?
They actually shifted him to wing.
Okay, but Desnoyers is still at center.
Yes.
Yeah. I saw Brzezinski is he officially gone?
Yeah.
They let him go.
He was good at and then in the system you got Knubel, right?
Yeah, but he's not going to be over yet. He might actually end up being one of the top 9 centers potentially, just on
So
paper right now.
Lashinsky, Marodi, and Brzezinski
So
might be not.
Lazinski's a UFA. I think he's probably gone, but he was the top line center.
All right, so that actually might work out then. That might work out where you will see Rizzo as a center. Third line wouldn't be a bad thing. A third line center coming right out of. But I don't know who the Flyers are. Like,
Rhett Gardner played the 27-year-old. I think he was in Dallas prior to
I
that.
think there's
Rhett
opportunity for Rizzo
center.
though, right? Like just with the center depth that the Flyers do have and the lack of it, there's definitely going to be a shot for him to play center and have an impact with the Phantoms. So,
and you know what else too is like if you have young wingers, why not have a young center with that young wing, and they could grow together, and they might one day be playing with each other down the road with the big clubs. So, I mean, I don't know who.
If he can play make, it would be a big deal.
Yes,
maybe put him with like Tuamala or something.
I was going to just say that him and
he's a very good playmaker. His skating is going to be criticized, but his playmaking, his overall like offensive feel in the zone. Like when there's a cycle, you trust him. When there's an entry, you trust him. When there's a power play, you trust him. You know, so
I suspect he's the reason why Lazinski and Adam Brooks and Marodi are unsigned. Is like they want to give
those guys are career with old. I feel
they're
those
career AHL guys,
career minor leaguers. Yeah, and this is a signal maybe of the organization's intent to get younger at every level. You know, and so between the Atkinson buyout, not qualifying or not like moving on. Remember, this is I don't know Briere and Jones. I know Jones knows the organization because he was doing TV, but as far as like the Hextall era. And then into the early portion of the Fletcher era, like that's not Keith Jones. That's not Daniel Briere. That's some other guy's idea.
Yeah.
So if they want to move on from that and say, no, we want our strategies, our guys, our systems, our staff, then it's totally fair. It's totally understandable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we all wanted to see what Riz. I think he had an injury, so we didn't get to see him play in the playoffs. But I think he's somebody we're eager to see, what he can do.
Yeah.
And does he have any NHL upside? Because we've been talking about him for a while, and he had a great collegiate year, but that doesn't always translate.
Yeah,
there's been
definitely
other
the guy to keep an eye on, especially like as an overager. I'm interested to see what he does in the AHL. Then you kind of assess from that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan of his. I'm a huge fan of his. I think his draft year, I had him ranked higher than where he went.
I think he was
so we're just waiting. We were just waiting. For, yeah.
All right.
But as far as NHL upside goes, I mean, we're going to have to see his first 2 AHL seasons to get an idea.
Yeah.
And then training camp will be interesting too.
Fair enough. Yeah. We were talking about preseason. It's like, that's a guy who, I look forward to seeing him in preseason. He'll probably get a look in a top 9 spot, probably early in camp. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about is the NHL playoffs. Right now, Game 6 is going on. Oilers are up 1-0, actually.
Connor Brown, shorthanded goal.
Okay.
It's crazy, too, because in the last game, Brown had a great shorthanded pass to Janmark, and he scored a shorthanded goal. So that's back-to-back games for the Oilers with shorthanded goals, which is interesting to me.
So right now, Edmonton seems to have momentum. I don't know. Would be pretty crazy if they were able to win the series. I don't want to count them out or anything like that, but the odds of winning 4 games in a row, pretty
Is Bobrovsky going to turn into a pylon at any point in the rest of the season, the rest of the series? That's what would have to happen.
I think Florida has a better team.
Yeah, I still think Florida is going to close out tonight. That's my prediction. I think they're going to win tonight. They're only up 1 goal, Edmonton. I can definitely see Florida coming back to win. But to your point, Yariv, like they have, they surpass Edmonton in depth in all areas, in my opinion. Edmonton has the star power. Other than last game, it hasn't really, helped them in this series.
Sure.
So we'll see what will happen in this one.
Yeah. And Steve, I think, we wanted to talk about this earlier, and I realized we never got to talk about it. So we can talk about the topic we had from last week where Florida built their team in a way that I think is something the Flyers in their path on could potentially replicate. Again, they do have, Ekblad and Barkov, which were both high picks in the draft, with you know both of them being in the top four. But they built their team a lot through just creativity, finding free agents, finding big trades, bringing the type of players they wanted to bring over. I talk about all the time, you don't need to have the best players in the league. You just need to have players who can play against the best players in the league. So you need elite players, but they don't have to be the number one in their position, right? They don't have to be the best ever. Ekblad wasn't considered the best defenseman in the league. He's a top defenseman in the league, but, he wasn't a big flashy name for a while. Maybe he is now. But what are your thoughts about kind of the way Florida built their team? And, they were pretty dominant to get to the finals so far. And obviously we're up 3-0 up until recently.
Well, they got a new owner, right? The Viola guy, Brooklyn guy. And he was in the Army too. And he basically wanted to change the culture of that team. That team had no culture. It was basically a backwater NHL thing that players went there because it was nice weather and there's no state income tax.
Right.
And that Tampa was the dominant hockey power. And when he took over, he's like, I want to rebrand. We are no longer the old Panthers. We're the new Panthers. And the part of that was spending a lot of money that, they went into analytics like everybody else. They're already in analytics, but drafting and developing was already like the other regime's thing. And it really got them nowhere, right? We knew about Barkov. We knew about Huberdeau. These guys were elite high picks. Okay. But a lot of teams get elite high picks. And we have Washington and Chicago and the Kings and Pittsburgh who won cups because of it. But we also have teams like Boston and St. Louis and, Vegas who didn't. So what exactly works? But his idea was to create a winning culture, but it was a trial and error process. And so I think that how they built themselves was in fact like trial and error. They could not beat Tampa. They were suffering bad playoff losses. Yeah. It started around like 2017 or 18, whenever it was, but they could not seal the deal in the playoffs. And when they finally won a round, was it a couple of years ago against Washington, they lost to Tampa. Exactly. And then it was like when they were losing to Boston 3-1, you're like, oh, well, what else is new? Remember, they were like the best team in the East,
right?
In 21 and 22 or 22, and then lost. So 23, they like barely got in. They were a wild card team. They were the wild card team. They were the 8th seed, and they were down 3-1 to Boston, and the rest is history. To get to that point, they spent a lot, and not just in contracts. Remember the Bobrovsky deal at the time was massive. A 10 years, $80 million.
Yeah.
It was
critiqued too. They
traded away almost everything that they had. Prospects, right? They traded away Tippett. They traded away Levi. They traded away a 2023 first round pick, unprotected for stupid Sherratt. And I say stupid. I'm sorry, he's not stupid. What I'm just saying is like to trade. I thought it was stupid at the time to trade.
It was
potential unprotected 2023 pick, right? And so but the biggest thing of all, what they did was they traded away their 100-point scorer. I mean, really, that the model is very unique. It was almost like old school pre-salary cap kind of stuff. Because if you look at they had no loyalty. They got rid of Uyghur.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
They got rid of Huberdeau. They got rid of everybody little by little. And I think I tweeted this out. The roster that they had in 2021 that 150 or was on pace for like 50 something games because the shortened season, only like 8 guys remained on the team, right? That's only a 2 or 3 season difference, and only 8 guys remain. So they are willing to make the hard decisions, and there's no loyalty. And so now they gotta pay a lot. Like there's nothing on the contract. This is not a team that we're going to see. It's like, oh, they're going to be great for the next 5 to 7 years. They have restricted free agents. They got restricted free agents, but they got to pay Reinhart. The guy just had 50 plus goals.
Yeah.
They also went through a zillion coaches. Think about the coaching carousel where they finally thought they found the right guy in Quinville, right?
Oh,
and they had to get rid of him 7 games into the season because he was in the Chicago scandal. So when they bring in Brunette, they have to. I think they fired him because of the drunk driving.
Pretty much.
Right?
Forgot
it was something. Whatever happened, and then Maurice ended up there because of the Winnipeg. You just quit Winnipeg because you don't like Wheeler and Scheifele were bad leaders. So it's a weird situation, but I think it was something that we saw developing, and a lot of these teams do that. The teams that win the Stanley Cup go through crazy adversity, right?
Vegas.
Look at the Bruins. You as Flyers fans should know what the Bruins went through. They blew the 3-0 lead and a 3-0 lead in Game 7. I'm sorry,
still to this day, that's crazy, right?
Yeah. It's so whether you want to build through the draft, you want to build through free agency and trades. I think the most common denominator though is humility and experience and losing. And this is where the GM and the owner and the coaching staff, more so the GM and the owner, have to and pro scouting have to get together. But in one thing I will notice about Stanley Cup winners, and there are very, very few exceptions, is you need 2 puck moving defensemen who could be a number 1 on any team, right? Or could be a number 1 on most other teams. If I went down the list, you go on Hockey Reference, Hockey DB, whatever you want.
It's so true. It's so true.
Every team in Florida now, right? Florida's got Forsling, Montour, and OEL. They have OEL, who was embarrassed in Vancouver, and understandably so. But you need to have at least 2 plus elite upper tier puck movers. The only exceptions, in a way, Pittsburgh. In the last 2 cups, they had Letang in one, and I think Schultz in the other. And then one year they won it without Letang. They won it without Letang. Which is nuts. But look who they had up front. That's why it makes the Toronto situation all the more stupefying. Is that you have these elite talents up front, but the defense has been abhorrent. And look at the result; it's not surprising. Yeah. So Florida made a tough decision by getting rid of Weegar. But remember, Weegar was a turnover machine in the playoffs. So you could see why they were like, all right, Huberdeau, we got the same working. So those are I'm a big fan of building from the net out. I really am. And maybe not necessarily through the draft, but from a team standpoint, if you can solidify goaltending and the defense, but more so the defense than the goaltending, because look who's won cups. Lighton went to the cup. Niemi, right? Even Matt Murray, like what is it, Binnington? These guys aren't Hall of Fame elite guys.
Look at those defenses around them at those points. Like even look at Vegas, Steve. Like Aiden Hill. Like think about Vegas' defense.
But look at the defenses though. Look at the 6-man crew or the 7-man crew.
Exactly.
I mean, New Jersey's a great example too. The Devils weren't holding teams to 25 shots or less a game because of a trap. They were doing it because their defense was incredibly mobile and skilled, and the IQ was through the roof. I mean, the Devils had on one defense, they had Stevens, Niedermeyer, and Rafalski.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is how I think teams should go about doing it. Florida, we want to talk about the heavy game, Kachuk, the dominating, the Barkov, the Selke stuff, fine. But look at that defense. Look at what Forsling. That's why the Rangers lost, by the way. The Rangers lost, not because they didn't have scoring from their top guys. The freaking Florida defense outplayed the Rangers defense in terms of puck moving, breaking out, decision-making, making plays, passing, completing passes, etc.
Well, I don't know if the stat still is true. Like now that it's the finals, I haven't checked, but going into the finals, Forsling and Ekblad didn't allow one even strength goal against while they were on the ice, which is literally nuts, right? Like,
it's nuts. Yeah.
No, it's just making me go back to our draft conversation, and you think about where the Flyers are drafting, and we were talking about a center, but you end up with a guy like Dickinson, and then all of a sudden you have Dickinson, Bonk,
and they played together in
Drysdale,
London,
York.
It's a good start. I mean, but you're not always going to build it through the draft. I like the Devils. I use that example, like Danico, Driver, Steve. Well, Stevens wasn't a draft. Niedermeyer, Albaline, those guys were draft picks. The Devils in '95 had like all their defensemen were puck movers except for Danico. Like 5 of the 6 were legit puck movers, and even when they went out and they got a defenseman from another team, he would be a puck mover too. And it doesn't have to be a puck rusher, like a great skater, just a guy that knows how to move the puck, and that starts from below the freaking goal line. And we saw a lot of teams struggle with that. So, and teams know. Tampa Bay with Sergachev and Hedman and McDonough, they all knew, teams knew that if you get the puck deep, it's you have to win that foot race and get there first. But even if you do, those guys are so smart and so accurate with their passes and so poised in many cases that first pass is going to trap 2 forecheckers. And that's why Florida was always countering. Like, so I don't know how this Edmonton series is going to turn out. I don't think the Oilers really have a chance. Florida's always been trailing in games. They've lost the bad game.
And they come back. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I could be mistaken. It would be crazy historic, but I wouldn't be the only guy thinking that Florida's going to hang on to win.
I will say this. Keith Jones said that he wants to build this team from the back end out. And, it does
seem he's mentioned it several times
to align with what you're saying.
Yeah, we'll start by moving Mr. Ristolainen. Start by moving Ristolainen, and
that might take a little bit. He's not even healthy right now.
Yeah.
At least that we know of. All right. I think we're good. We did over 2.5 hours, so I think we could probably call it on this one. Steve, I guess give people a shout out to what you're working on, where they can find your stuff. Obviously the draft is coming up. We'll have you on post draft. But maybe they can, do some more pre-homework based on your stuff before.
Just my Substack, draftanalyst.substack.com. And then my draft report will be released either Friday or Saturday. I know it's only a week before the draft, but I include an NHL portion in it. So I cover every team, there's prospect depth charts. There's, there'll be about 250 scouting reports. There's also a history of draft lottery history in there. So every lottery's been documented and detailed and documented. So it's going to be $5 if you subscribe for 1 month. You cancel it after that. And if you want to buy a hard copy, it'll be I think like $14.95 on Amazon. And it's like 250 pages or something. So I've been doing it every year since 2018. It's what I do for me. I do it so I know things, and I keep referencing myself. So basically it's you'll get it. You get to tap into my brain from a hockey standpoint in the draft by picking up a copy, but that's pretty much it. And then awesome. Weekend of the draft, I'll probably be doing running live blog, a live thing. I'm not gonna do a live stream, but I'll just do like a running blog post updating, giving you my thoughts, etc. So
okay, awesome, fantastic. So please, everybody, make sure to check that out. Vasili, anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have an article out coming up on Flyers Nitty Gritty early next week, just kind of going over some draft options that I think would be best for the Flyers from my perspective. Then I'm gonna actually be at the draft next week in Vegas as well, so I'm gonna try to bring some of the interview content of all the prospects the Flyers draft. So follow me on Twitter at Flyered Up. Usually I post all that stuff there. So yeah, plan is for us to bring some great draft content on the Flyers Nitty Gritty site and the Flyers Nitty Gritty Twitter. So just keep an eye out, and we're gonna have you covered for everything Flyers that's draft related next week.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited for you to be there, dude. It's gonna be great. So yeah, just want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications, follow us on iTunes, Spotify, give us a rating there if you can. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so now. It's the best way to support this site and our YouTube channel. So please. And also shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They are reopened. Go to Jim Steaks at 4th and South and get yourself a cheesesteak. Have a cheesesteak for the draft. And also shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment need. Have them check your insurance company's claims. Again, that's 215-752-0560. Steve, thank you again so much for doing this. You are the man. This was a great episode. Vasili, thank you as always.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. Vasili, thank you as always for being awesome. And thank you to everybody else who really appreciate you guys listening, and we love you. And remember, always stay gritty.